Let's move on.
Say what?
I'm wearing shorts. No, I know that's what you're thinking, and I know you're holding back, and about 1 o'clock you're going to make fun of me. Just do it now. Let's get over it.
Everyone in the library has remarked on them.
No, they haven't, Marjorie. Actually, none of them have remarked.
They have remarked on them.
Okay, fine.
Look at that very big man in those very big shorts.
Okay, thank you. So last night, the House Select Committee wrapped up what is being called Season 1 of their public hearings on the events up to and including January 6th. And because so much evidence, they say, and new information is still coming in, they have said they will hold more hearings in September. We've learned, obviously, a ton about the madness that went on that day, including this new sound from yesterday's hearing. This is raw footage of former President Trump recording a speech to the nation, finally, on January 6th, unwilling still to admit his own election loss.
But this election is now over. Congress has certified the results. I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
Okay. So of all the moments in these hearings, what has most stayed with you? Was it the two Georgia election workers who said they didn't feel safe anywhere? Was it the pathetic, faux little tough guy, Senator Josh Hawley, running for his life?
Oh, my God.
From the coup that he helped stoke? Was it Donald Trump?
Exactly,
the clenched fist
pump, like he's a
Was it
tough guy.
Donald Trump, knowing his vice president's life was at risk, yet urging the rioters on? What was the moment that so far will stay with you most from the first round of hearings? Give us a call or text us at 877-301-8970. You can tweet us at BOS Public Radio. What was it for you, Marjorie?
Well, I have said this many times. I think the most impressive person to come out of this whole thing, besides the witnesses who were very brave to come forward, like Cassie Hutchinson, and last night, Sarah Williams, I think her name is. Sarah Matthews, is Liz Cheney. We have a little sound of her. She gave this summation last night, which made me want to get up and salute the flag. Here she is talking about the courageousness of these witnesses, in particular, the women.
Both of you will be remembered for that, as will Cassidy Hutchinson. She sat here alone, took the oath, and testified before millions of Americans. She knew all along that she would be attacked by President Trump and by the 50, 60, and 70-year-old men who hide themselves behind executive privilege.
Boy, I love that.
I mean, she talked about the courage of these women. She talked about them as role models for young women who may be watching this whole procedure. They have been very courageous because they have been targeted and attacked. And the other thing, besides what you mentioned, Trump rearranging his speech several times the day after January 6th, was what the Secret Service thought about in the moments of the attack.
Do you want to play that? We have that sound too.
Yeah, we have this sound too. This is an indication of how disturbed the Secret Service were at the White House, not just about, at the Capitol rather, not just about Mike Pence and about protecting the people they needed to protect, but about their own lives. They were describing how, this is someone else describing the level of fear for Vice President Pence's safety among his own security detail.
The members of the VP detail at this time were starting to fear for their own lives. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of very personal calls over the radio. So it was disturbing. I don't like talking about it, but there were calls to say goodbye to family members, so on and so forth. It was getting, for whatever the reason was on the ground, the VP detail thought that this was about to get very ugly.
Saying goodbye to family members, and let's not forget, and I'm sure no one has, the infamous tweet from the madman president, Donald Trump, and that's what Bernstein of Woodward and Bernstein called him on CNN last night, that essentially he added fuel to the flames to make it more likely that his vice president and the people who protected him, not to mention members of Congress, would have their lives at risk. I'll tell you, the moments that I will always remember, one incredibly trivial, and I'm sure there are more, but one incredibly trivial was the thing I mentioned. Josh Hawley, the tough guy. We all saw the photograph the day of with him, that clenched fist out to the crowd. And then when they showed him last night running as fast as he could, but even better, Even
get
better,
away from the mob.
Right, getting away from the mob that he was right on with. Even better is everybody in the audience at the hearing laughing out loud at how pathetic this faux tough guy was. That's one. Two, and this, I assume you'll agree, you will imprint it on your brain. When Shay Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman, the two election workers from Georgia, testified, and the daughter said, maybe it was the mother, with tears in their eyes about how they didn't feel safe anywhere. They couldn't go to a grocery store. They couldn't go outside. Is powerful, a powerful demonstration about the impact that Trump's narcissistic, sick, destructive to democracy behavior had just on average people trying to help their communities, being election workers, making sure the count was legit. I'll tell you, but having said that, let me echo everybody else, the brilliance of the construct and presentation of this hearing. I have no idea in the long term what the impact is going to be. The one thing I do know, and I assume you agree, the impact on the history, the historic retelling of these moments is a forever change because of the brilliant work that this committee did. Our number is 877-301-8970.
One last thing before we get to the calls. They also replayed last night the Republicans that initially after the January 6th attack were totally disgusted with Donald Trump. They included Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell.
How does he live with himself after those statements?
And shortly after Kevin McCarthy expressed his disgust, he humiliated himself by going to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring, as so many people have put it, because he realized his political fortunes were... I mean, the point Cheney was making is that there are many people who risk their lives and their careers and their future by coming forward, and then there are many people who didn't, and that's almost every Republican who still talks about this big lie, even though they know it's a lie.
Yeah. By the way, we're going to play one more thing before we start. Is our coworkers, when I was speaking, got a little bit of sound from those two election workers targeted by Trump. The first voice you'll hear is Shay Moss, and then her mother, Ruby Freeman.
It's turned my life upside down. I no longer give out my business card. I don't transfer calls. I don't want anyone knowing my name. I haven't been anywhere at all.
There is nowhere I feel safe. Nowhere. Do you know how it feels to have the President of the United States to target you?
So we want to know in the next few minutes, based on this first round of hearing, what will most stay with you? We talked yesterday about whether the president's committed crimes. If he has, should he be indicted? Should he be charged? Should he be tried? We're going to step back a little bit and say, what are the moments, small or large, that are sort of imprinted on your brain from these first rounds of hearings? Paul and Braintree, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you much for your call. Hi.
Thank you, Jim and Marjorie. A small but and very subtle production aspect on last night's hearing. Did you notice that the only news clips that they showed came from Fox News at the same time that Fox News was showing the oleaginous Tucker Carlson and then Hannity.
Oleaginous. I like your word there.
No, that was, as you know, Paul, and we know has spent a significant part of his life in the media. Not only that, but as Marjorie has said almost every day, all Republicans, all Trump-loyal, Republican-loyal Republicans as witnesses. It's brilliant, and the Fox News point was great. Paul, thanks for the call.
I turned to see what Tucker Carlson was doing at 8 o'clock last night, and he was criticizing President Biden for coughing down in Somerset and perhaps spreading,
true?
Yeah, at the top of his show, perhaps spreading COVID germs from the podium. That's what he was talking about.
You know, one of the most depressing moments of not the hearing, but the after hearing was to me, and then we'll get back to your calls and texts at 877-301-897. Remember Rusty Bowers?
Yes.
Who was so great early on, the Arizona Secretary of State, who said he got a phone call from Trump. He said to Trump he couldn't do what Trump was asking him to do because it violated the Constitution and the law. And it was really a powerful moment from an older, sort of rock-ribbed conservative Republican. That was the heartening part. And then he was interviewed as he's leaving, and he was said, well, if Trump were to run against Biden in 2024, who would you vote for?
Trump.
Trump. I mean, which sort
Yeah,
of...
it seems hard to justify if you're worried about violating the Constitution, voting for a guy, again, who's violated the Constitution in any number of points in his career. I mean, it just seems a little odd.
Against the guy, even if you don't agree with his policies, there's nobody except Fox News that says this is not an honest, decent, patriotic American, meaning Joe Biden. Again, you can not like his policies. Compare that, and Bauer says he'd vote for Trump. Ashley in Wakefield, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure.
So I just wanted to say that I'm overwhelmed by the amount of white privilege that I have noticed throughout this whole thing. I was mentioning to your screener before that, like, you could be a black person living your life, shopping, having mental health issues. You may get
right.
shot.
Yeah.
And then people question your entire life of whether or not it was okay for you to get shot by the police. You're the victim, but then somehow you're on trial. And in this case, it's blatant that a lot of people did illegal things, and yet none of these people are in jail. Nothing has happened to this point.
Well, a lot of the rioters actually are in jail now, but in terms of the big boys and girls, you were totally right,
But
Ashley. That was a brilliant call.
Ashley, if the people storming the Capitol that
Were
day
black.
had been mostly black men armed with guns as opposed to mostly white men, I mean, can you imagine the difference?
Well, they'd be dead. I mean, I think is that... Ashley, that was terrific. Thank you for calling. 877-301-8970. You know, we didn't mention, a caller mentioned it yesterday in terms of that, and it plays off what Ashley said. Merrick Garland, who we've been very critical of from time to time, the day before yesterday said it as emphatically as he could without saying, I'm going to go after Trump, emphasize that no person in this country is above the law. And it's pretty clear the message was clear that if the facts are there, and I think every sort of sane person knows the facts are there are going to be some prosecutions of some very high-level people, maybe the highest-level person out of these hearings. Where do you want to go, Marjorie?
Let us read Bill from Gloucester. It's still disturbing to me to the White House staff who testified years to realize Trump might not be all that good for democracy, which is a very interesting point. You know, a lot of them use the excuse that they liked his policies. You know what was very impressive last night?
Well, the guy went out of his way, the national security guy, the first words out of his mouth last night when he was asked the first question, the witness, was, I'm proud of many of our foreign policy accomplishments, which, by the way, I think makes his testimony more effective for whatever it's worth. But what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that he was a very impressive witness. He spent many years as a Marine. He was a very serious conservative. I don't know what I was going to say, just that he was an impressive guy and that they were all people that were very, very close to him. But the excuse a lot of them gave, and Cipollone gave this excuse, and he was the lawyer to the president, that he worried, and the former Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, gave the same excuse, that he worried that if he left in disgust, that someone worse would replace him. And that's not...
Esper said it to us on the radio,
he
by the
did
way,
say it to
when we were
us.
talking about his book. Yeah.
That's not ridiculous, because as we know, the president was trying to replace people that were giving him any kind of blowback with complete and total yes men.
Yeah, you and I have a difference of opinion on that, but I don't think it's resolvable. Let's go to Weymouth and Maggie. Maggie, welcome to the show. Hi.
Actually, I'm in Wayland.
Wherever you are, we're happy to have you. Hi, what's up, Maggie?
Thank you. And it's pickleball Maggie, by the way.
Oh, pickleball, which I still don't understand, which is perfectly fine. Go ahead. I know it's somewhere between ping pong and tennis. That's all I know, but I don't need to know more. Thank you, Maggie. What's up?
And badminton. I want to talk about Cassidy Hutchinson.
Yep.
Yes.
Because I think she was just truly amazing.
She was.
This young woman is 25 years old.
6.
And she was so poised, and she had so much information that was so important. And then she gets nailed afterwards by, somebody saying she's lying. And then, fortunately, other people have said, no, she's not.
Well, by the way, two things, Maggie, in terms of people saying she's lying, none of the people who said she was lying came into the committee and testified under oath, which I think blows away their dismissal of her. Number two, there are reports, as I think I mentioned the other day, that when Liz Cheney ended that day's hearing by by laying out two examples of alleged attempted witness tampering that one of the two, the news is reporting, I think it was the New York Times, maybe the Washington Post, was talking about her. So to say she did it brilliantly and then probably with absolutely great risk to her own life after she was done testifying. We haven't heard about where she's living,
I just was thinking
how she's
that,
living.
yeah.
Is she at some undisclosed location? Maggie, thank you for that call. She was unbelievable. But, I know you touched on this before. Do you not say, when you hear, like Sarah Matthews say, that tweet on January 6th was it for me?
To go after Pence.
After go Pence. Yeah. And so many others have said the same thing. As horrible as that text was, to me, it is not qualitatively much worse than many of the things Donald Trump did to vulnerable people. Powerful people like Mike
parents from their
that's
babies.
That's the first example I was going to give.
Yeah,
and they thought it was fine to keep. I'm not taking away from the courage of their testimony and the importance of their testimony, but it bears noting they thought it was fine to work for a man doing those things.
Yes, but you heard what
years.
Amber said about white privilege.
Ashley,
excuse me. Maybe it had something to do with white privilege.
Maybe.
They were not white people being separated.
Yeah, but my point is, it isn't, but that is exactly, I guess, the point, is that it isn't justified. The notion that when Mike Pence's life is at risk, now
I'm saying
we're having an
there
epiphany.
might be a tinge of racism
I'm sure there is.
there.
Well, and classism and everything else.
Now, speaking of racism, you know how a lot of these southern states are trying to ban the teaching of critical race theory, even though it's not being taught. But we're not supposed to talk about not supposed to do anything that's going to make white little kids feel bad about slavery.
Exactly.
Well, one of our emailers is wondering about
bad about themselves. I don't know about bad about slavery.
How wonderful this is about for the historical record. You know that we're getting these hearings.
Yeah.
But this texter wonders if the historical record of these hearings will be banned from curriculums in states that have banned the history of slavery and racism. That is a very excellent question. It could be true.
877-301-8970 is both our texting and calling number. Paul in Fitchburg, hey.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. Great show.
Thank you.
For those of us who can't see the shorts, what color are they?
Look, Paul, can I tell you, if you want to find out, come on down before 2 o'clock and you can find out for yourselves. Don't answer the question.
They're off-white.
They're khaki, if you need to know.
White, okay.
And by the way, I think it looked rather fetching in them, to be perfectly honest.
Everyone was wowed.
I think they were. Hi, Paul. What's up?
Very stylish, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Well, I think, there's been so many moments. I think the committee's doing a great job.
They are.
Last night when Liz Cheney had the White House counsel tell everybody who in the White House, who was the person in the White House that wanted the riot to continue. Everybody else said, no, let's stop this thing. She got him to say the president without saying the president.
Yeah, that was brilliant. There was a long pause. I think his counsel said privilege, meaning we can't answer the question. But you are so right, Paul. The pause was so pregnant and so clearly said there was one person left, and it was him.
Well,
that's a great one, Paul. Thank you for the call.
And answering privilege basically says it was the president, doesn't it?
Speaking of that, before we take a break, a variation on what Paul just asked about. Here's sound from one of the two reps who ran the hearing, Elaine Luria, last night, questioning of Pat Cipollone, the former White House counsel. This is recorded testimony about Trump's inaction on the Capitol riot. Luria, then Cipollone.
Are you aware of any phone call by the President of the United States to the Secretary of Defense that day?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Are you aware of any phone call by the President of the United States to the Attorney General of the United States that day?
No.
Are you aware of any phone call by the President of the United States to the Secretary of Homeland Security that day?
I'm not aware of that, no.
This is the President's General Counsel, the Chief White House Counsel, Pat Cipollone.
We're talking about the biggest takeaways from the January 6th hearings. Going to keep talking about it after this quick break. You're listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. Our number, 877-301-8970. You can call or text us at that number or tweet us at Boss Public Radio.
Next time on The World.
2 billion. That's the number of people in the world right now who have never heard the name of Jesus.
Evangelical missionaries spread the gospel to indigenous people in Brazil, and President Jair Bolsonaro's government has opened the door to them so they can bring their faith to the Amazon. But it may be less about saving people's souls and more about developing their land. Our story on the world.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and Subaru of New England. The 2022 Subaru Forester is an SUV option for your summer adventures. You can find your Subaru retailer at SubaruofNewEngland.com. And Showcase Cinemas, the new feature film Where the Crawdads Sing, based on the novel by Delia Owens, is now playing at Showcase Cinemas. Tickets available on the Showcase app or at showcasecinemas.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Reagan, live at the library. Of course, it's Friday, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're reflecting on the first round of the hearings, which concluded last night to be continued in September. What's the moment or moments? What are the moments that were the ones that are sort of emblazoned in your head that are going to stay with you? Even if it wasn't the biggest moment, what's the one that most had an effect on you? 877-301-8970. Marjorie pointed out during the break, and I want to correct this, I mentioned that outtake speech was January 6th. It was the day after the 7th. 877-301-8970.
We also didn't mention the name of the guy that was the national security guy, Matthew Pottinger.
You know why I didn't mention it?
Because I forgot it.
Because I forgot it. That's why I didn't mention it. You know, by the way, the other thing is, because we've spoken about Liz Cheney ad nauseum.
He's got a career.
Do you see the latest poll out of what state she's from?
She's losing by double digits.
28 points because she decided to stand up to arguably the most corrupt president of our lifetimes. The Republicans in her home state of Wyoming are on the verge of rejecting her by anywhere from 20 to 30 points to a candidate
really
embraced by Trump.
I imagine they're just ignoring all this because you can't believe the election was stolen after listening to this.
Well, also, do you know, he calls her, like everybody else who opposes him, a rhino. And as you and I both pointed out,
she's voted with him almost
93% of the time, Liz Cheney has voted with Donald Trump on bills, on legislation, on judicial nominations.
But I've said this before, I'll say it again.
Say it again.
What she should do if she loses, and it looks like she's going to lose, is she should run for president, if only to be up on the stage in the debates.
Assuming he's there.
Well, even if he's not there. She could be up against Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, well, wait a second. But if he's campaigning from jail, I think it's going to be a little... Don't you think that's going to be a little uncomfortable?
Oh, my God. You can only hope. Let's go to Tim in Worcester. Thank you for calling.
Welcome, Tim. Hey.
Thank you very much for having me. Such a great topic. The one thing that really kind of moved me last night was when Liz Cheney was summarizing the night and the amount of information that they had. She seemed to be signaling the DOJ that this is what we are going to be going to the DOJ with. Up until this point, I hadn't really heard anything that really kind of sounded any kind of, alarm about the DOJ, and that really kind of made me a little bit excited.
If you're looking forward to a prosecution of a former president and his allies. Tim, thank you for the call.
The dereliction of duty was the big thing last night. I think before people were talking about obstructing a congressional process. That was the thing. But last night it was standing by, doing nothing. And there was a point at which I think it was... Who came in and said, we got to make this look like Trump is doing something. It can't look like Pence is calling out the National Guard. I think it was the chief of staff there, Mark Meadows, that was concerned that it was going to look bad if the president were not seeking more law enforcement reinforcements. Anyway, let us now go to...
A lot of people, by the way, were taken, and they just showed the footage repeatedly on CNN. The Josh Hawley thing, I'm sorry to mention it again. If you have not seen this, Google this pathetic creature, clench fist to the crowd, and then scurrying away like a little chicken. It's just, it is... What a hypocrite. What a coward. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Well, needless to say, I guess he didn't think anybody was going to catch him on camera as he jogged like he was running the marathon.
Do you think
down
they
the hallway.
sped up that video? Because one of those things you have little feet and like a little dog is walking. It's like, exactly. And I'm wondering if it's like 1.5 speed, like Nick Quah's newsletter.
I don't know. Let's go to Abby in New Hampshire. Hi, Abby.
Hello, Abby. Welcome.
Hi there.
Hey.
So So I've been listening on NPR basically since the beginning of the hearings and haven't been watching on TV. So I watched last night, and many of us have said this many times before, but it was watching the actual footage again for the first time in a long time. It was just so upsetting to me to see that ocean of, let's face it, white people pressing in against this handful of Capitol Police and just thinking, what if this was BLM protesters? What if these were black people? They would have had helicopters. There would have been guns. The military would have been there. I mean, it just really, it just struck me because I hadn't actually looked at the visuals in so long that it really hit it home for me again.
That's a wonderful point, Abby. If I can add to it, the brilliance of the production of these hearings, we didn't mention from last night, was juxtaposing a specific moment in time of the assault that you're describing the video of with what Donald Trump was doing at exactly that moment, whatever it was. While they're attacking X, he's on the phone for an 8-minute call with that other madman, Rudy Giuliani, with dye dripping down his head, probably. You're so right, Abby. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it.
And you know what else came out last night? That usually you have the official White House photographer who's taking pictures all the time, and he was shunted aside. No pictures tonight because they knew that this was not something that the Record wanted to record for President Trump. That he was glued to the Fox News TV and making phone calls to other Republican senators to try to help him keep this farce going. They didn't want any photographs of that.
You know what was interesting also last night before we wrap this up is that in earlier hearings that we all play lawyer, even though I theoretically am one, about when I'm making up a number, 2/3 of Trump's advisors say X about, for example, losing the election. 1/3, again making up a number, saying he won. Is it plausible if he were to be tried, saying, well, I believe these people, the Giulianis, the Eastmans, the Sidney Powells, etc. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Cipollone testimony last night about January 6th suggested, and this is the point you were making a minute ago, I think, that there was nobody except Trump himself. I mean, he was going down the list. It appears there was nobody, to use the double negative, including his kids, Don Jr. and Ivanka. I don't know about what's the third one's name? Eric. I don't know where he was. Saying that you have to stop this. Every single one.
Correct.
So it makes the dereliction of duty thing even more important. And I was unaware on that point. Larry Tribe was on, obviously, constitutional law guy who was the teacher of Barack Obama, Merrick Garland, et cetera, at Harvard. He was on with Judge Gertner on TV with me last week. And I asked him something like, I understand how an act can be seditious or criminal. Can a failure to act be? And then he said for a president, the answer is dereliction of duty. The failure to act absolutely can be seen as a criminal offense, depending on the circumstances. So there you are.
Okay, we are done with this for now anyway, but we're going to, up next, talk with the Boston Globe's Christopher Mueller and Deborah First about this great series they did covering the hidden gems of the Cape. They went from Upper Cape, Mid Cape to Lower Cape. It's absolutely great. If you're going to go to the Cape this summer, you're going to hear that up next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live.
From the GBH Newsroom, I'm Lee Hill, Executive Editor for GBH News. The community listening sessions are really important because we are building a newsroom without walls. So we are literally going into communities, building relationships, and often getting story ideas. People are telling us this is what you need to be paying attention to in this neighborhood that nobody's ever asked about. Part of your community. GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org. And Comcast, Xfinity Internet is committed to bringing speeds over a gig to power your devices while fitting your needs and a range of budgets. Learn more at xfinity.com/gig.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Reagan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by Christopher Muther and Deborah First. Christopher is a travel writer for the Boston Globe. Deborah writes about food and reviews restaurants for the Boston Globe. It's also why she's joining us remotely today, obviously to protect her anonymity. She's a restaurant critic, etc. Together, they've created this brilliant four-part, comprehensive, though slightly inebriated guide to travel on Cape Cod. Christopher, wearing the only Nancy Sinatra fan club t-shirt in the world. And Deborah, welcome to the show. How are you guys? Hi, Deborah.
Hi, how you doing?
Excellent.
Hi. I was just telling Deborah to Christopher before we went on the air, you guys did an awesome, I've spent every summer of my life on the Cape, and I didn't know about half of these places, so I'm saving it and handing it out to all my friends so we can know about the neat places to go.
We have to say one thing so they don't get bent out of shape. The two of them write only about 3,000 times in the series. This is not a best of,
That's correct.
Worst of. We know that.
We know
you don't
that.
have to say it. We know there are only two areas. We're going to get the lobster rolls and ice cream in a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
There you'll do a best of. Other than that, it's just, what would you say, Christopher? Observations about the Cape? What is it?
It's more of a Garrison Keller kind of, no, I'm kidding.
I can't stand him, by the way. I know you're not supposed to say that on National Public. Excuse me, let's go and take a look at the dancing choir.
So, what we
Jim,
want...
that was excellent.
That was a pretty good imitation.
Very good.
Thank you.
For someone who doesn't like him, you do like a spot-on imitation.
But we do have one kind of best thing, well, besides the ice cream and the lobster rolls. Was there a part of the Cape you liked more? The Mid Cape is around the Upper Cape is around Hyannis, right? Mid Cape is Chatham, that kind of area.
I had to bring a map so I could remember exactly.
Lower Cape is out Provincetown, Wellfleet. Was there one? I mean, the conventional wisdom is that the Wellfleet area is the prettiest because of the Cape National Seashore, but maybe you don't think that.
You start, Christopher. Was there one?
There were a couple. So I really I'm familiar with Chatham, and I like Chatham, but I really like the Monomoy, what's it called?
Island.
The Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge, where all the seals kind of hang out. And it's like a beautiful boat ride down there. But I was really pleasantly surprised at some of the places that we went because, as Deborah and I say in the series, the part where the canal was always like if I were to label the parts in my brain, it would be the canal area is the part where the traffic is. The Mid-Cape is the part where it gets really a long drive. Chatham is normally somewhere where I need to stop to take a bathroom break, and then Provincetown is where I end up. For me, that was like geography of the Cape.
We just have to say what you said about Chatham. You talked about it as being bursting with hydrangeas, of course it is, but also bursting with well-coiffed travelers whose lustrous locks defy both humidity and sea breezes. They come out at the cocktail hour with genteel waves of crisp white pants and casual pricey blazers. At cocktail hour, followed by diners in Italian driving, loafers, statement jewelry, and nautical shift dresses.
Do you mind if we talk to Deborah a little bit, Marjorie, or no? Hi, Deborah. How are you?
Hi. I just was noting that sounded so poetic when you read it, opposed to so catty when we wrote it.
Hey, Deborah, you're a lower Outer Cape kind of woman until this. Am I right about that?
I'm definitely an Outer Cape person. We go there every summer as a family, and I have sort of tended to dismiss the rest of the Cape,
Me too.
where I went as a child, as sort of like the childish pursuits. But honestly, we had a great time there. There were a ton of surprises. The beaches of Dennis are so beautiful, and we really enjoyed going out on the flats in Brewster, which we did on a very buggy but deeply romantic moonlit evening. It was pretty stupendous and gorgeous and cool. We just discovered a lot of things we didn't know about as well.
We're going to go down a list like we did when you two were on television with me the other night about, accommodations, recreation, food, etc. But before we do this, I want to mention something that was clear to me, and I assume everybody reading the series, starting with you, Christopher. I mentioned this to you the other night on television. Every time you stayed overnight, Deborah is in the Chatham Bars Inn, for example,
Great
for
place.
$1,500 a night or whatever, looking at the ocean, and you're staying in a parking lot. I mean, is that a fairly accurate description of what was going on?
I mean, as a gentleman, of course, I'm going to let Deborah have the nicer accommodation. Essentially what happened was we were supposed to trade off. One night, Deborah would be staying in the nice accommodation. The next time, I would be staying in the nice accommodation. But as a professional travel writer, I really messed up, and I kept picking places, like the nice places were the scary places that I stayed in, and then Deborah's nice places were actually nice. So I was overlooking parking lots. And Deborah was looking at the ocean, but in the end, it wasn't that bad because I'm used to staying in fancy places, so it was good to ground myself a little bit.
Hey, Deborah, I've never spent the money to stay in the Chatham Bars Inn. What's it like?
I've never spent the money either, and I don't think I ever will. This stuff is kind of wasted on me because really all I can do is compare the nightly price tag with my monthly mortgage payment, and they're not that far apart.
Yeah.
It was lovely. The service is great. Everything's attended to, but also I also felt like, well, you had to pay to do additional things. It's not like,
really?
An all-inclusive.
Really?
So then I feel like, okay, well, are we paying for what's there, or are we paying for who's not there?
Wow.
But the hydrangeas were worth the price of entry.
Yeah, they do have beautiful hydrangeas. There's also Quasset, which is the other gorgeous place. It's right near there. But let's talk, Deborah, about you are the food critic here, about best in ice cream and lobster rolls. So I was heartened to read your choice about best ice cream. What was it?
Well, we really, really, and I heard you loved this as well. We really love Four Seas in Centerville.
It's great.
It's like a fantastic, classic ice cream parlor, but the ice cream is so delicious. And Christopher and I are the only two people in the world whose very favorite flavor of ice cream is peppermint stick. We feel very, very strongly about it. So we ate it everywhere that we went. But while there, I did diverge and have a taste of the peach ice cream. And it was so good that it almost made me sad that I didn't get that instead.
Deborah, I have to tell you, Marjorie comes in this morning. I'm raising my right hand as the truth. The first thing she said to me is, I'm leaving at 2:02 because I want to beat the traffic to the Cape. And let me tell you what I had last weekend. I had peach ice cream at Four Seas with whipped cream.
Real whipped cream.
Whipped cream.
Yeah,
So you were right
peach
on.
is one of my favorite. The lemon crisp is. I don't even like ice cream, but I love the Four Seas ice cream. And you know what's neat? You guys probably noticed all the newspaper clippings on the wall about the Kennedys who got married a half a block away, Caroline Kennedy, Maria Shriver, in Our Lady of Victory Church. They have all these old clippings, and they employ the high school kids from the area.
I love that it's been there for 88 years, and it feels like it's been there for 88 years.
It
However,
does.
the ice cream is so spot on and so perfect because they make it there, and it doesn't feel like, normally it would be like a tourist trap, you would think, a place that's been around that long, and this is so not a tourist trap. It's feels very genuine, which is what I liked about it. Also, I like the peppermint stick.
Peppermint stick is great.
Deborah, I learned the other night that what's his name here? Christopher Muther doesn't like lobster, so we'll stay with you. Lobster roll, this is the second area in which you two were willing, well, not Christopher, but you, willing to make a best of choice. What's the best lobster roll from your trip?
So this is the best from our trip, not on the Cape, as you stated earlier.
Yeah.
But so Christopher dragged me on this really long bike ride, and I hadn't been on a bike in a decade, but it was a lot of fun, and I made it all 14 miles. But at some point we needed to stop for a little refreshment because Christopher might have been whining about the rain just a little. And so we pulled it only a little. I was whining too. I just was so far behind him he couldn't hear me.
Let's just clarify who was whining more on this trip. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
He did. Okay,
so lobster
Christopher
roll.
whined
Let's
more.
hear it.
Okay.
Right. So on the side of the busy road is this seafood shack. It's called the Seafood Shanty, and which is a great name. It's in Bourndale, but it is right on the busy road.
Yeah.
And so we pulled in, And the lobster roll that I got there was just classic. It was like just a toasted bun, a little crunchy lettuce leaf, and then this tremendous pile of lobster with just a tiny bit of mayonnaise on it. Huge pieces of meat, super fresh, really delicious lobster, and it was great. It was everything you want in a lobster roll.
Deborah, were you, and I assume it was, speaking of mortgages, what was the cost deal?
Right. So lobster costs are really high this year. Sure. Welcome to summer 2022. So I think it was probably about $30, but in the realm of lobster roll prices, that actually is pretty par for the course. And this one had double the lobster of many lobster rolls you'll get for the price. So there's that. I will say also, our colleague Dan Shaughnessy recommended that we go to Cook's in Orleans, which we did sort of with the hopes of making fun of him, but actually we loved it too.
Well, Cook's is sort of a fried food kind of experience for the most part, right?
It is.
They have great fried clams there.
No, can we actually, Deborah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can we get this settled right now? In fact, I'll settle with Deborah. Deborah, we had this, it almost got a little contentious the other night. Christopher, in your series, talks about eating clam strips. And I am of the belief that clam strips are not really food. A clam, a full-bellied fried clam, is food. Where is the restaurant critic for the Globe do you fall on that existential issue?
So I'm going to surprise you a little bit, and I'm going to say, first of all, like the heart wants what it wants, and Christopher's heart really wants clam strips. And you know, they're a great vehicle for tartar sauce, or cocktail sauce, which is my choice. And they're crunchy, they're fried. You know, I prefer a whole belly clam, but I am not gonna knock a strip.
Okay, so where's the best clam strip on the Cape? Excuse me, not the best. Where did you have the best clam strip experience, Christopher Muther?
There was a place called, and help me out here, Deborah, was it Skipper's? Was that the place?
Is that your favorite clam strip?
It was,
yeah. In Yarmouth.
In Yarmouth, because the onion rings also, I think, really worked with the clam strips. But the ones at the seafood shanty were really good. But as we said before, the tartar sauce there was better. So I was more of the judging clam strips and tartar sauce, being true to my white trash roots. That's what I needed to do. Whereas Deborah, with a refined palate, went for the lobster.
Yeah.
We're talking to Christopher Muther, obviously travel writer for the Globe, Deborah First, restaurant critic for the Boston Globe, about their joint travels through the 4 regions of Cape Cod, culminating. Today's was the day the final piece appeared in the paper, right?
Yep.
Part 4, Outer Cape, Provincetown, etc.
So you saw a shark.
Yeah, I saw a shark.
Please tell us.
We were at the Beachcomber, which neither of us had been to, even though it's like a local institution in Wellfleet. And, you know, we maybe had imbibed just a tiny, because, you know, when in Wellfleet, you know, do what the Wellfleetians do. And so we had this amazing cocktail called the Miami Vice. I'll just throw this in before the shark, which is part frozen pina colada, part frozen daiquiri with a rum floater.
Oh,
I mean, it's like summer in a cup.
Yeah.
And as Deborah pointed out to me, the guy who recommended it to us had these amazing eyebrows, which I wouldn't have noticed. And so what I learned is always take drink recommendations from people with nice eyebrows.
Absolutely.
Which is why I would never take one from Jim. So back to the shark.
Your eyebrows are quite lovely, Christopher.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just had them threaded. So I walked down to the water, maybe feeling really good. As Katrina and the Waves once said, I was walking on sunshine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was down, and there were some seals frolicking, and I looked out, and I'm like, seals. And I'm like, uh-oh. I know what happens when you see seals. And then I saw the fin, the lifeguard blew her whistle, and everyone ran out of the water.
Was that exciting or terrifying? I mean that sincerely. I'm not sure how I'd react.
I wasn't terrified because I wasn't really out in the water. I was like ankle deep because, as you know, like Cape water, you can't really swim in it unless you're looking to get your feet amputated. So I usually just waited most of the time that we were there.
So you saw the shark come in and actually kill a seal?
I didn't see any murder happening, but there were people with binoculars. You know how there's like those pervs at the beach who always
Yes,
have binoculars?
I do.
All of a
You
sudden
have
they
to
were
watch
out
out for
on the
them.
water.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh. And then they were saying shark, and
Yeah.
then someone lent me his binoculars, and I looked out, but I could see it without the binoculars as well.
But they're really they're really patrolling very carefully now, from everything I read about there, so that when they're looking for these sharks, so you do have a chance to frantically race for shore.
Yes.
Hey, so Deborah, Marjorie knows seltzer and water are essentially all I drink. A seltzer and coffee are essentially all I drink.
What a fun guy.
What's the, well, I drink whatever. What's the coffee deal in your estimation on the Cape in your travels this time?
I was really happy about coffee because I feel like in Boston, I'm always sort of looking for that perfect cafe where I want to hang out. And I can never quite find the right one. Even in Cambridge, I know that's where the good cafes are. But I think, I don't know if it's a real estate cost issue, but the Cape is able to support a lot of really nice local roasters that are also coffee houses. Like Snowy Owl, which has a few outposts. And so I was really happy that I was able to get a good cup of coffee pretty much everywhere I went.
Oh, really?
Fresh roasted beans. Yeah, it was great.
So how long did it take you guys to do this? I mean, this is a pretty intensive look at all these places. You didn't go to Falmouth, I don't think, did you?
We went everywhere.
You did?
We
Okay.
really did go everywhere. We went to Falmouth.
Okay.
Yeah, it was over a month that we did this.
Okay.
But it would be 2 to 3 days each week. We would go down, then we'd come back, write the story.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of back and forth between us to make sure, like, we wanted a dialogue within the story. We didn't want to write a story which was, and then we did this, and then we did that. We really wanted to kind of show what it's like when you go on vacation. And I have to throw this out there, and I think Deborah would agree with me. We've worked together forever, and we've sat next to each other at work forever. And have done social things, but we've never spent these significant blocks of time together.
To really get to know each other.
So I was really worried when we began, and by the end of it,
and by the end of it,
like I feel like we were starting to feel uncomfortably attracted to each other.
Is that right?
We had these moonlit nights at the drive-in.
It was your eyebrows, Christopher.
One of you talking, exactly.
Oh, the Wealthy Drive-In?
Oh, absolutely wonderful. We saw Top Gun Maverick there, which Deborah loved the movie.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. But it was, there was a full moon that night. We had our lawn chairs out. We were under a blanket watching it.
Rattling our junior mints.
Yeah, but don't you think, when I used to go to the Wealthy Drive with my kids, all the time when they were young, it's sort of like going to Fenway. You don't have to go for the baseball game, and you don't really have to go for the movie. It's sort of like the drive-in experience, Deborah, no?
Exactly. I had no interest in seeing this movie at all, but the second we realized that it was playing at the drive-in, I was like, I want to see this movie so badly.
Yeah.
So, Deborah, first, if for people who, I assume everybody listening, in fact, we're going to end the show today by asking people to contribute to your contributions, namely, what's the one thing on the Cape that really knocks your socks off, that you love, that you recommend others? What's the one thing of any kind, whether it's miniature golf or a meal or a whatever it is, or a beach or a hotel to stay at? What's the one thing that was a surprise to you, let's say, as opposed to your usual haunts, that you'd pass on to the next Cape consumer? Deborah first.
Oh, it has to not be my usual haunt?
Yeah, not your, well, let's do a non-usual and then a usual. Let's do both. Go ahead.
Okay. So the thing that I hadn't done before, we went kayaking in Chatham, and it was really wonderful. I am not a kayaker because they always try to make you do these practice rolls, and I don't want to do them.
I'm sorry.
But these people did not make us do that. And so we had a really, really lovely paddle all along the shore, and it was great. It was totally beautiful.
So how about the thing that you've done for the years you've traveled to the Cape that you'd recommend to others?
Well, the locals aren't going to like this, but I really, really love the kettle ponds in the Wellfleet and Truro area. They're just really beautiful to swim in and also very hard to park by. They have delicate ecosystems, and so I think people are worried they'll get overwhelmed, but not just, environmentally, but also by strangers.
Well, the
Well,
parking
that's
lots are
sort of-
really small, by the way, so I don't think you need to worry
But
about.
that's one of the great tragedies on the Cape now is that we're just hearing in the news that more and more of them are having to be shut down because of cyanobacteria.
Yeah, I know that.
Because people
Right.
fertilize their lawns too close to the water and they're not monitoring their septics and the torrential rains from climate change. I'm obsessed with cyanobacteria. It's kind of a sad state of affairs.
Okay, let's move from cyanobacteria. Let's go back to Chris Remuter and Nancy Sinatra. So what are your, again, your usual haunt that you want to recommend and something that was totally new to you from your trips with Deborah?
Yeah, my usual haunts are Provincetown, just because all of my friends have second homes there and I don't. So they'll invite me. In fact, I'm headed there after this to stay with friends. And so my usual haunt, which I recommended, I don't know if a lot of people outside the gay homosexual community really do this. There's something called tea dance.
Oh, I've heard about it.
So
yeah, tell
I
us.
highly, highly recommend, if you've never been to tea dance at the boat slip in Provincetown, it's kind of like a massive deck on the water with a pool, and they have these amazing rum punch cocktails, and you just like hang out and people watch and look at the water, and it's breezy and it's beautiful. And
You have a great photo of it in the story, don't
I
you?
do,
You have
yeah.
a great picture that you
Yeah.
took, by the way, because
so-
Glove didn't send a photographer. Okay, and so what's the non thing that was new to you that really is something you're going to go do again someday?
Yeah, I mean, the Globe didn't really need to send a photographer
'Cause you were there,
because they had
exactly,
Deborah and I
that's it,
there.
yeah.
I mean, this is also so there's a few things. One would be beaches that I normally wouldn't have gone to. You know, there are like great beaches in Wellfleet. There are great beaches in even like Dennis, like places I wouldn't
Even
think.
Dennis.
I'm sorry, people of
You're
Dennis.
such an elitist. I mean, it is so bad.
I'm not. I stayed in parking lot hotels.
He
All right,
did.
let me just bring that up. But the one thing that I've never done before, which Deborah alluded to, kayaking. We did a sunset cruise in Hyannis, and when I was in Provincetown, I have a friend with a boat, and he took me around. And I really feel like when you're on the Cape, it's important to get on the water. And I realize that also sounds really elitist, but you can do this easily in any number of ways. So I was really surprised because the guy, my friend with a boat, took me around to Boy Beach and anchored, and we just hung out on the boat for the afternoon. It's something I'd never done before, and I highly recommend anchoring off of Boy Beach if you enjoy watching nude swimming from 10 feet away.
Yeah, who doesn't is the bottom line.
true.
By the way, I highly recommend your series too, because even if you think
It's
you know
great.
the Cape as I do and Marjorie does, there's so many unexplored regions for you, like there were for you two. It's fabulous. Congratulations to both of you, and it's great to talk to you both.
Thank you so much for joining us, Christopher Muther and Deborah First. It was a great series. You should look it up in the
Deborah, thanks. It was great.
In the Boston
Thank
Globe.
you.
Everything you ever wanted to know about the Cape and didn't know. I didn't know this stuff either. Okay, coming up, we're going to talk with another Boston Globe employee. That would be business columnist Shirley Young about efforts on Beacon Hill to codify abortion access in Massachusetts, and the outsized role that a single word is having in the debate among lawmakers. That's right after the noon news. You're listening to Boston Public
Oh, wait
Radio.
a second. Oh, wait. If you stay during the break, Christopher's going to sing These Boots Are Made for Walking for the crowd at the library. Listen. They really want to hear it. He'll be doing that in maybe 30, 45 seconds, so
Okay.
don't go away. I'm sorry.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Reagan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and members of the Ralph Lowell Society. These most generous annual contributors lead the way in sustaining GBH as a public media resource available and free to all. Learn more at wgbh.org/Ralph Lowell. The competition heats up as 6 remaining home cooks share their favorite special occasion and holiday recipes on The Great American Recipe. See how they handle the pressure tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Trusted, local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, the House and the Senate have yet to come to an agreement on language that would further protect abortions later in pregnancy in Massachusetts, often performed to protect the life of the mother. We'll hear from Boston Globe columnist Shirley Leung about the latest. Then it's environmentalist Bill McKibben to discuss the retreat on climate in both Congress and the Supreme Court. And then we'll talk about his terrific new book, a memoir titled The Flag, the Cross, and the Station Wagon. And tech man Andy Anatko discusses the book industry's efforts to strip public libraries of their rights to e-books.
We'll finish the week with another Live Music Friday here at the Boston Public Library. David Ibbett and James Monroe helped orchestrate the Museum of Science Black Hole Symphony. They'll explain. We'll get them to play some of their music, and wait till you hear this. All that and more ahead. Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Closing arguments are underway in the trial of former Trump advisor Steve Bannon. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports Bannon is facing criminal contempt charges stemming from the congressional investigation into the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol last year.
Steve Bannon has pleaded not guilty to 2 misdemeanor charges for failing to comply with a congressional subpoena. The prosecutor in the case told jurors that the attack on the Capitol represented a dark day for America and accused Bannon of failing to recognize Congress's authority or play by the government's rules. Defense attorneys argue that Bannon believed the subpoena's deadline dates were flexible and subject to negotiation. Bannon on Thursday waived the right to testify in his own defense. The judge in the case has instructed the jury to refrain from watching or reading news coverage of the latest public hearing examining the Capitol attack during deliberations. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
The House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol says more hearings are planned in September. NPR's Tom Dreisbach says a new schedule was laid out at last night's public hearing.
When the first primetime hearings from the Select Committee started, they were only supposed to continue through June. Those plans have changed. Here's the chairman of the committee, Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi.
Our investigation is going forward. We continue to receive new information every day. We are pursuing many additional witnesses for testimony.
The committee is now supposed to reconvene in September when they'll continue to examine President Trump's attempts to remain in power after losing the 2020 election. Tom Dreisbach, NPR News.
Ukrainian grain shipments that Russia's been blocking in its war against the former Soviet Republic are resuming under a major agreement signed today. They have each signed deals with Turkey. The head of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, was at the signing ceremony in Istanbul, where he spoke of the threat the standoff has had on food security around the globe.
It will bring relief for developing countries on the edge of bankruptcy and the most vulnerable people on the edge of famine. And it will help stabilize global food prices, which were already at record levels even before the war, a true nightmare for developing countries.
More than 20 million tons of grain and other food shipments are expected to begin flowing through the Black Sea to other countries that depend on them. At last check on Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up, or down rather, 61 points at 31,975. The NASDAQ is down 182 points, or 1.5%. This is NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro in Brookline this Friday. Prisoners' rights advocates are calling attention to the fact that most state prisons do not have air conditioning. As temperatures climb, inmates usually turn to fans or water to keep cool, and state rules only limit how cold it can get inside, but not how hot. Jesse White with Prisoners Legal Services says a policy is now needed.
Statewide baseline humane standards on this that would cover a maximum allowable temperature, across the state inside of our prison system.
Audits performed by the Department of Public Health after a heat wave in 2018 showed average inside temperatures around 89 degrees. Those audits happened after complaints from prisoners. The Department of Corrections says it regulates temperatures and provides fans. Believe it or not, temperatures and humidity expected to get even worse this weekend. National Weather Service has issued a heat advisory for large parts of Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and including our whole listening area north of us. And Sunday is expected to be the most oppressive, where it will feel like 100 degrees with the humidity. Weather Service meteorologist Rodney Chai has some practical tips for the weekend.
Minimize your outdoor exposure during the hottest time of the day. Drink plenty of fluids. If you have a pet, don't lock the pet in the car. And look out for one another. And mostly common sense things, but sometimes people might forget.
Yeah, stay hydrated is the key. 90 degrees in Boston right now, 90 Providence, 87 in Worcester. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One with the Capital One Quicksilver Card. Details at CapitalOne.com. What's in your wallet? Credit approval required. Capital One Bank USA, N.A. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Rowdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library. We're also streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hi there, Marjorie. Just to give you a little heads up, starting a couple of months ago, we do music every Friday as part of our show. We just heard a little taste. They were doing a sound check of the Black Hole Symphony. It is as different a musical performance as we've had here. It's going to happen in the 1 o'clock hour. And if you're not here, I would really advise you I think it's a beautiful day, too hot for some. Stop on by. That'll be roughly 1 something this afternoon. But first, we're joined by Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung. Shirley, it's nice to see you.
Good to see you, Jim and Marjorie. It's been a while in the studio.
I know, we've missed you. Where have you been? Have you been on vacation or what's going on? You've been in the paper a lot.
I've been in the paper. I haven't been slaughtered on Tuesdays and Fridays when you're here.
I'll tell you what she's been doing. Can I tell you about the latest text I got from her?
Yeah.
Shirley has decided, and I love this because I'm lonely sometimes. She'll send me a text of what she's doing with her life. What did you text me the other day? What did you send me a photograph of?
Did I send you a photograph of something? Oh.
Yeah, she got a water cooler in her house.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The home office is complete.
So
exactly. I got one of those bubblers, and so I get delivered 5-gallon water, and now I have my own personal water cooler at home.
That's right.
I also texted you about H Mart.
You did. That is exactly
H-Mart
true.
coming
Moving to Quincy. That's correct.
Not moving, opening a new store. Life-changing for me.
She also said she can gather around the water cooler and have a conversation with herself, is what she said.
Exactly. That's what I miss about the office, right? Office gossip.
The water cooler,
So the water cooler's not exactly the same.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
I like
it's great.
The
Go perfect with the dumpster
gossip.
outside the house.
Exactly, the dumpster. Coming back in Columbus Day weekend, I think.
Beautiful.
So Shirley Young for the Boston Globe, you wrote a great piece about what is going on up on Beacon Hill in terms of some split on this abortion bill, and Jim has some updates on it too, I believe.
Yeah, but let's first hear what's going on, and then we'll play a little Charlie Baker sound from yesterday.
So the House and the Senate are trying to come up with a compromise on this reproductive rights bill, and they literally disagree over one word, and that one word is severe. And so I've been writing about this, and some of it started with a story I did in May about a woman named Kate Deneen. And last July, she's 33 weeks pregnant, and she got a fetal MRI back, and her unborn baby had a catastrophic stroke. And she was being treated at MGH, and she's like, I want an abortion. And so any abortion after 24 weeks is considered a later term abortions. Mm-hmm. And the House and Senate legislature, they overrode Charlie Baker's veto to pass this new law called the Roe Act last year, so that someone like Kate Deneen could get an abortion in Massachusetts. She doesn't have to travel to the handful of states to get an abortion. But her doctors at MGH said, I'm sorry, that the law, it does not allow for you to get an abortion. Now, her baby, the doctor said, 50% chance the baby will die before it's born, 50% chance the baby, when he's born, he'll have very little quality of life. We're not sure how long he will live. when he lives, he will just have only know a life of suffering and pain. And so she, being the compassionate mother, she was like, I think the right thing to do is to have an abortion. So she had to travel out of state. Imagine 33 weeks pregnant, carrying this baby, and she had to go through
being heartbroken,
and having to travel to Maryland to get an abortion. And so she didn't want this to happen to anyone else. And so she has been lobbying. She herself is she's a lobbyist, and she is an advocacy for a business trade group in town. So she knows how to work Beacon Hill, and so she has been a force on Beacon Hill in getting the House agreed to add the word severe, because MGH said, and other doctors have said, if you add the word severe fetal anomaly, not just lethal fetal anomaly, then doctors will feel more comfortable performing a later term abortion.
And the dispute, House is embraced severe, the Senate lethal. Yeah. That's why they still haven't sent a bill to Baker's desk. We had Governor Baker on yesterday, and Marjorie was asking him questions about this. And here was his response to something you said in your column.
There are people in the legislature who said point blank when they saw that story that that's a complete misinterpretation of the law as it currently exists in Massachusetts, and that was one of the things they were going to talk about in their conference committee about trying to clean up. By the way, not that Shirley's column was a misinterpretation, but that the Mass General's interpretation of the law was inconsistent with what they believe the language actually said.
What did he mean? What does he mean, Shirley?
Well, he was quoting, he was citing what Senator Cindy Friedman has been saying, and she was quoted in the paper, and she told me this in an interview, that she believes the law is solid, that MGH did not follow the law. And so that's actually the story I'm pursuing now. And I actually had an interview with Dr. Chloe Zera this morning. She's a maternal fetal medicine doctor at Beth Israel. She also serves as like the vice chair of a national trade group, and working on health policy. And so maternal fetal medicine, they are the doctors that work with the sickest pregnant patients. So they're not the regular OBGYN. And so this is her world. And she told me that that the law right now is really challenging. And I said, do you think...
The law in Massachusetts.
The Massachusetts Roe Act is very challenging just to have the word lethal. She said there are very few instances in which, a very small number of cases in which it would be deemed lethal. Because I asked her, do you think MGH was wrong? And she's like, I only know the case through the paper, but I can just tell you that there are very few cases. So I said, well, what would be an example? And she said, well, if the baby had no brain. And I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty extreme.
Yes.
And so, but if the baby perhaps had some brain cells or a heartbeat, that
might
would
be on the fine line.
Yeah, fine line.
Can I describe the state of this bill, which is going to get me incensed about a topic that I care a lot about, that I've mentioned all the time, and I apologize to people. The way the law works in the state, the rules of the legislature, is when a bill is sent to the governor, unless it's a budget bill where he can do line item vetoing, a specific provision, there are only three choices when this bill gets to Governor Baker's desk. He can sign it, he can veto the whole thing, or he can send it back to the legislature with amendments. Now, the reason that's significant is the legislature is going home in 9 days. The governor has 10 days to act, which means if the governor chooses not to sign this bill, if it gets to him today, tomorrow, the next day, but after the 10 days, it will get to him after 10 days, assuming it gets there at all. And he, for example, does what I assume he'll do, is send it back with some amendments. He's not going to veto it outright, obviously. The legislature will be gone by the time he does that, unless he does it early. So if we end up without legislation from Beacon Hill, and they've gotten huge praise for what they're doing, the reason we will not have it, you may argue, is because of the governor, assuming he does, deciding to send it back with amendments, but it's instead, in my estimation, because this legislature feels the need to take a 5-month vacation in an election year. If they were not recessing or adjourning, whatever the verb is, on July 31st, in a year that doesn't end till December 31st, they would be there to consider whatever Governor Baker chooses to send back. And he may sign it, I don't know. But if he doesn't, the reason it will not become law, if it does not, in 2022 to protect more women is because the legislatures decided it's more important to go home than to do their damn work. It is just unconscionable, and I don't get it. And you have no idea when they're attempting to finish this thing, or do you? Or do you?
I mean, there was a hope that the House and Senate would reach some kind of agreement yesterday.
Because that's the 10-day deal.
That's a 10-day. They have not. So now it gets rolled over to next week, which means that, as my understanding, the Senate needs to get on board, or the Senate needs to agree to something with the House, and then after that, then Baker has a tremendous power, on what to do with this law, and so but I'm still hoping that. The House and Senate and Governor Baker will do the right thing. I mean, we have really
just sign the damn thing, whatever gets to his desk, right?
I mean, and because as I wrote in my column, this is part of a package. So there are all these other things going on in the bill, like no more deductibles for abortion, making protecting providers from out-of-state prosecution if they are giving abortions to
a lot
women.
of great things
Yeah,
if they get it to his desk.
If they get to a desk,
okay.
but the sticking point is this one word. And in my column, I said, listen, they can't just this one word is. They need to reach an agreement on this one word because it's really important, because it's not only the bill then becomes not only helps women and residents of Massachusetts, but it will help women across the country who need an abortion, and they can come here to get one.
Okay, another story that is aggravating but spectacular is you do a piece on transportation.
Oh, okay. Why don't we talk? I thought you were going to ask the question, Jim, but I rolled my eyes.
Maria Rodriguez, right?
Maria Rodriguez.
Yes.
Tell us about Maria
about
Rodriguez, a custodian who cleans biotech labs in Cambridge. Her travails, back and forth to work.
So I first got to talk to Maria Rodriguez a few weeks ago, and she was telling me about her commute, because I was trying to interview people about, how's your commute been affected by the reduced T service, and she lives in Air, which is about 30 miles outside of Boston, and she has a part-time janitor job in Cambridge. So she has to go from Air, commuter rail. She gets off at Porter Square and then takes the Red Line or the bus to Central Square, and then she has a 7-minute walk to the Novartis lab, where she cleans in the evening starting at 5 o'clock. And so she was telling me about her commute and her frustration, because things are always delayed. But I was like, Maria, you realize you spend as much time, if not more time, commuting than you actually are working. And she's like, I don't think, I'm not sure she kind of got that. It's like, you work from 5 to 9, but you leave your house just before, 2:45. You take 2 hours. And I think what was the two things that really got me about that story is that, and when she gets off at 9 o'clock, the next train home is not till 11:05.
And the cost.
And so she has to wait. Yeah, so the cost is, so she was upset, because she was like, she actually wasn't so upset about her actual commute. She was upset
until she talked to you.
Exactly. She was upset about how much she was paying for the commuter rail, $388 a month. And that, I said, and so I said, and she said that is more than 1 week take-home pay. And she's like, for that amount of money, I expect really good service. I expect the trains to run on time. I don't expect as many breakdowns. And so that's what she was upset about, the most about her commute. So.
We had some good fortune, and while people in the Orange Line had some bad fortune in terms of timing. As Governor Baker walks into our studio yesterday, a woman is diving from the subway line outside of Somerville into the Mystic River. I mean, it's almost unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
So here's the beginning of our discussion about there was a fire in a train, the woman jumped off, etc. Here is the beginning of the discussion we had yesterday with Governor Baker about the state of the T.
Is it unfair to say the T is a total mess?
Yes, but it's
Why?
not unfair to say what happened today is unacceptable. The T has the rapid transit system has an 88% on-time performance. The commuter rail is over 90%. The buses are in the high 70s, despite the fact that they run on streets with everybody else. There's a lot of work that the T has done to dramatically improve its performance and to invest in modernizing its infrastructure over the course of the past 8 years. There just is.
There was a little bit of tension in the studio at that point, and then I said back, being on time on a reduced schedule is nothing to be bragging about, not those exact words, but, particularly when it comes to business and bringing people back downtown, this is not just an inconvenience. This is a real obstacle to town coming to life again.
It is, and I have a colleague, and I remember when remember the Red Line had there was a derailment on the Red Line in 2019, and
driverless trains.
That's
Marjorie's favorite.
Dr. Zhivago photographs.
And remember how there was reduced service that summer? There was another summer, the original summer of discontent on the T, and I remember one of my colleagues who she takes the train from Quincy into downtown Crossing, and when she does that, it crosses the Neponset River on a bridge. And I remember she was telling me her biggest fear is that the train will stop in the middle of the bridge. Yeah. And I was thinking, what are the chances of that happening? And of course, it's happened yesterday on the Mystic River, the Orange Line. I was thinking, she's never coming back now.
I'm lying in bed last night doing the worst thing you can do, which is read tweets about your interview with a public official. Jim and Marjorie, you are the two weakest slugs who have ever lived. You're pathetic, you're this, you're that. So I'm reading that and I'm reflecting on the conversation, and I analogize that, having just watched the January 6th hearing, to that. We are so immunized, if that's the right word, to the excesses of the most corrupt president in the history of the United States that when you hear he does something outrageous, it's sort of like, yeah, that's what Donald Trump is. I was so embarrassed when I got home last night. Not only was the train on fire, a woman jumped into a river to save her life.
And it was like a really high, that bridge is pretty high.
And I say to myself, I asked one question about this and moved on. It is unbelievable.
We blew it, Jim, let's face it. We blew it.
No, I'm serious. Think about it.
That's right. But I want to ask you one related question to this. About the cost, there's a lot written about how we need a cheaper fare for people that qualify, because a lot of the people that do take the T, they're young people, they're kids, they're people that aren't, driving to pay $40 a day to park underground at some swank garage downtown. We have to ask our transportation people, that $388 a month fare for someone who's a low-wage worker, that's a killer, as
The
you
reduced
point out.
fare thing didn't make it through the legislature.
I know, but it should. I mean, it really should.
Yeah, and what I kind of painted the story is that, I guess it's based on distance. So the further you live, you pay more. Right. But ironically, the closer in tends to be the more well-to-do, like Belmont, Lincoln. Those are the riders that actually can afford to pay the higher
way
bills.
Out there because they can't afford an apartment.
They can't afford to live here. But I want to make one more point about money before I forget. I think the other thing that shocked me, talking to Maria, is that when the T is late, when the T makes her late, it actually costs her money. She gets she gets dock pay, because so that happens to a lot of hourly workers. The union was telling me that. So one time she's supposed to start at 5, she didn't get there to 5:30. She lost pay, and so that's why a lot of hourly workers leave very early. So their commuting time is longer because they literally can't afford to be late.
Isn't that nasty? She works for whom?
She works for, she cleans the labs at Novartis, but they have an outside contract.
So they always blame and they say, we don't have anything to do with it, we have a contract. Yeah. Can I say one last thing? Yeah, I know particularly Brian McGrory, your boss, who used to be a columnist, hates when I would give him a column. Here's a great column idea for you, if I may, okay? Here, take this idea. Even if we can't get reduced fares as a big thing, how about if we implemented the following? That if you're on the train and it gets on fire, and you have to jump into a river, you get a 50% deduction on your ride.
You should get your money back. You should get your money back.
At least half your money back.
No, that came up.
Depending on how far you got in the ride.
You could get a free pass for the year.
Right.
And think about all the people that could get free passes for the year.
The woman who jumped in the mystery, she should get.
She been interviewed, by the way?
Yeah, she had. Well, she was interviewed by one of the TV stations.
I didn't see
but not on. All you heard, you didn't see a face.
The disembodied voice.
You just hear the disembodied voice, and but yeah, I want her to step forward And maybe we'll all if the T won't give her a free
Go fund her.
Yeah, we'll do a GoFundMe and give her a free pass for the whole year. How about that?
Can I repeat? She jumped into the damn river to save herself.
No, what is that? Like a 20-foot, 25-foot?
I wouldn't have jumped. I don't know. I don't think I would have
like Tom
jumped.
Brady jumping off that cliff when he was on vacation with Giselle.
Did you see? Even I think it would have been hard for me to just jump out of the window down to the tracks. That's steep too. You know.
I guess maybe she was a lifeguard. Really good swimmer or something like that. Okay, so let's talk about this.
Wait, wasn't there a boat that was right there that got her from?
Oh yeah, no, she got rescued. They came around and rescued.
But still, it's a jump.
But didn't the story say she refused? She wanted to swim to shore by herself.
Because she thought it was safer than relying.
Yeah, I hope she didn't have any open cuts. You know, the Mystic River. I don't know if I want to be sworn in the Mystic River. But anyway, let's move on to something else, Shirley Young, that you wrote this great piece about. We're supposed to lessen the gender wage gap after this equal pay law was passed in the state, but it hasn't quite turned out that way. What happened?
So I love this piece. I love this piece because I got to write the penultimate lead, right? Are companies overpaying white men? So one of the hallmarks of the 2016 gender pay equity bill was that companies could no longer ask about salary history. So you're applying for a job, and typically you're asked, you know, how much have you been making before? And the reason why legislators and advocates wanted that out of, banned that practice is because women tend to be paid less than men. So if you ask them what they made, it perpetuates the inequities, right? And so then what happened was that employers asked a different question. What are your salary expectations? And so because white men think of themselves as,
greatest thing ever.
Greatest thing ever. So they came up with a number. They went for the moon. They went for the moon and stars. So they started saying, well, I think I should be making $1 gajillion.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the women and people of color who don't have such inflated egos gave more modest numbers. So as a result,
I owe my entire salary to Jim Browdy. I just want to point that out.
Can we be clear? Because this gets on the radio. Do we make the exact same salary?
We do,
okay.
and I thank you.
As we should.
Because believe me, if I wasn't with you, I'd be making about 10% of what I'm making now. If I weren't dragged along in his coattails, it's been great for me. Let me tell you. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, fine. You're welcome. I don't think that's for me. I think that's for her. That applause. But thank you anyway.
But anyway, so now people are saying the gaps are the white men, their pay is out of control with this new law. So we need to come up with a fix to this. And one of this is to start, instead of mandating that employers begin to kind of, when they post a job, they said this is the salary range. And also, if you're at a company, you can then go to your HR departments like, I'm in this position, what is the salary range? And so the idea is that, let's say you make $82,000 as a project manager, and now you know the salary range is $80,000 to $100,000. So then how do I get the $100,000? So then you can go to your boss and be like, what would it take for me to get to $100,000? What are the responsibilities or new skills I need? I was told that women and people of color tend to be in the range, but on the lower range.
Yeah.
You know what the problem with this thing is as a former union president, as I said, all you have to do is go to HR to get the information. That takes a little courage because you're worried, well, if I go there, are they going to think I'm complaining?
Right.
They're going to tell me. There should be an affirmative obligation in the law, not only to do what you mentioned, to publish the range of salaries so a person who doesn't work there or does work there gets to know what the deal is. It doesn't name names. And secondly, the employer should have an obligation annually, something to reach out, or HR annually, to affirmatively go to the employee rather than saying the employee has a right to go, you know what I mean?
Right,
to go, it's
right.
just, it's hard. I
And,
mean, it's
and
really,
the second half of this bill, which I don't think it's going to unfortunately go anywhere this session, is that to require companies with 100 people or more to publish the gender and diversity wage gap. Yeah.
That's and obviously they don't want to do that.
They don't want to do that because because a lot of companies would be like, we overpay white men.
Yeah.
And they would have
exactly.
a riot and protest on their hands.
Did Marjorie mention we make the exact same salary on the radio?
Yes,
I
you
can't
did. Thank
remember.
you,
Did you
Jim.
say that to the dollar?
Absolutely. I'm very, very grateful.
Shirley, you've really hit, we were talking about you this morning, Martin. You've really hit a home run, like column after column after column.
They're all
It's
great. Do we have time for one more?
No.
We don't?
We don't, but we do have time for it. Can you possibly send me some photos of the inside, I don't know if your closets or something, this week, just to keep me up to date on H Mart's coming to Quincy?
When
What
I
do
go to
care
H
about
Mart,
H Mart coming to Quincy?
come on.
What is H Mart? Please tell people.
Oh my God, it's this Korean supermarket.
Yeah.
It's like a
Fabulous.
mecca. It's amazing. And the Cambridge one is so tiny.
Shirley says to me a couple of months ago, the Cambridge one that I go to is so tiny. She sends me to Burlington.
Yeah.
Because she said it's like a superstore. And as I'm in the H Mart in Burlington, I'm texting her as I'm going down the, honest to God, and she is telling me what to buy in what aisle.
They have a whole
And boy, was she good.
a whole refrigerator section dedicated to kimchi.
It's
like you think there's
unbelievable.
only like one or two kimchis? No.
You know
there-
what kimchi is,
Yes,
right?
I do. It's that drink.
No, it's
No.
not. It's-
Wow, jeez.
Sorry I asked.
Wait, what?
Marjorie was kidding when she said that.
What's it? This a
No,
drink?
that's kombucha.
Oh, kombucha. Whoops. I think it was a
Let me,
K.
can I withdraw the question? Maybe
I don't know
forget
what
that I
kimchi
asked.
is.
It's spicy cabbage.
Oh, spicy cabbage.
Yeah.
That's what you meant. Didn't you mean
I eat
it?
a lot of peanut butter. That's what I eat.
Kombucha is like a drink.
Yeah,
okay,
kombucha.
fine.
Fermented drink. It's not even. I don't.
Okay,
It
fine. I
could
think
be
we've
Asian. It
embarrassed
could
her
be Asian.
enough.
I don't think it's
know.
Korean.
But I don't know if I said we make the same salary, so it's okay.
Yes.
Hey, Shirley Leong, we love
Okay.
having you here. Congratulations on another bunch of great columns. See you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Stay
Shirley
cool.
Leong.
Stay cool, everybody.
Absolutely.
All
We've been
right.
speaking with Shirley Leong, the great business columnist of the Boston Globe, and you are a great business columnist. Your stories is so fantastic. We're going to talk up next, though, to somebody else who's really great and really crusading, is environmentalist Bill McKibben, about his brand new book, The Flag, the Cross, and the Station Wagon, plus what is going on. Are we ever going to get out of this climate disaster? Bill McKibben is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Billy Porter's directorial debut is a Gen Z romantic comedy. A young boy named Cole falls in love with his classmate, Kelsa, played by Eva Rain.
This film is just your typical boy meets girl, and the girl happens to be trans.
Actor Eva Rain on working with Billy Porter and telling a story close to home. This afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Comcast. Xfinity Internet is committed to bringing speeds over a gig to power your devices while fitting your needs and a range of budgets. Learn more at xfinity.com/gig. And Sunbug Solar, offering solar and battery storage renewable energy solutions for your home or business. To learn how you can build a more resilient future, you can visit sunbugsolar.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Joining us in a minute, or actually right now, is Bill McKibben to discuss his latest book. It's a memoir of sorts, and it's terrific. And the retreat on climate by both Congress and the Supreme Court of the United States. Bill's latest book sort of encapsulates in the title the whole thing here. The Flag, the Cross, and the Station Wagon. A graying American looks back at his suburban boyhood and wonders what the hell happened. It's available everywhere now. Bill, as you all know, is an author, educator, founder of 350.org and thirdact.org. And by the way, he's wearing a Third Act t-shirt, unlike Christopher Muther, who is wearing a Nancy Sinatra fan club t-shirt. Bill's newsletter on Substack is called The Crucial Years. Bill, great to see you. The book is fabulous.
Well, thank you very much, and good as always to be with you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us today, and ditto, congratulations on the book. I can totally relate to almost everything you wrote in here, because we're about the same age. But tell us what you were saying with the Flag, the Cross, and Station Wagon, and what happened, because many of us, millions of us, do wonder what happened.
Well, it is a book right up your alley, because it's about Boston and the suburbs around Boston. In the era when I was growing up, most of the action takes place in the 1970s, really, which seems to me a hinge decade. Somehow we went from the country that had come out of the Depression and the Second World War and was embarked on the project of, however haltingly, building the Great Society, building what Dr. King called the beloved community. And by the end of the 1970s had finished with that project and decided on the next one, the kind of Reagan era project of every man for himself and get rich while you can and so on. And we still live in that world. What I wanted to understand was how that transition happened. And so I looked back at Lexington, where I'd grown up, where we'd lived as literally middle class in existence as it was possible to live, right down to the fact that we lived halfway down a street called Middle Street.
I love that.
And so, Lexington was a good vantage point, partly because of its particular history, which lets one think about American history, but partly because it was as suburb as it was possible to get, as typical of what happened across America as growth centered in those places and as they began to shift our sense of who we were.
I can't quite shake the image of little Bill McKibben in his little tri-corner hat doing the tours, but we'll get back to that in a minute. One of the examples you give early about your experience as a kid, Bill McKibben, really, to me, sort of sets the stage for the whole book. Describe the juxtaposition of your father participating in an anti-war demonstration, which was led by somebody everybody here knows, and with a vote in the town not too long after around creating affordable housing.
These were two things that happened in Lexington in the same year, 1971, in fact, a few weeks apart. And I knew about one of them because, as you said, my father played a part, and it stuck in my mind in the deepest way. This was at the height of agitation over the war in Vietnam, and the leader of the Vietnam veterans against the war was a young, lanky, charismatic, handsome, recently returned Lieutenant John Kerry. And he wanted to have his protesters camp on Lexington Green as part of their protest. And the town fathers in Lexington, and they were mostly fathers in those days, said, no, this is not allowed, and called on the police to arrest them, at which point a couple of hundred townspeople joined those protesters, sat down on the green, and were hauled away. I was down there on Lexington Green that night until shortly beforehand, since I was 10, my mother said it was time to go home, but my father stayed behind and was arrested in what's still the largest civil disobedience action in Bay State history, I believe. And of course, it made a great impression on me. My father was a mild-mannered business reporter. This was not but to me, what it symbolized was that the world was headed in the right direction, that people were organizing to do things like stop wars, like take women seriously, this was months after the first Earth Day and the passage of the Clean Air Act, on and on. The second thing, which I didn't know about until I started researching the first thing for this book, was a referendum that happened in Lexington. Like most of suburban Boston, Lexington was white pretty much completely. And one of the big reasons was that Black people couldn't afford to move in. There was less overt segregation, no restrictive covenants or things, but there was that barrier of money. And so some of Lexington took that seriously. Sometime after Dr. King came to speak in town, people formed the marvelously named Suburban Responsibility Commission. And the first thing the Suburban Responsibility Commission did was decide that it was Lexington's responsibility to build some affordable housing. And so in 1971, a proposal came forward for a modest development, 100 units of multifamily housing, and seemingly everybody got behind it. Every preacher in town was extolling it from the pulpit, the paper endorsed it. Even town meeting, Lexington as a representative town meeting, voted overwhelmingly to allow it. But, as something that happens rarely in Lexington, people petitioned for a referendum. They weren't satisfied with the town meeting vote. And so when people went into the privacy of the voting booth, they voted by a 2-to-1 margin to deny that first modest affordable housing development there's no more black people in Lexington today than there were in 1970. And, and really, for me, what that typified was the other half of this equation. It may have seemed like the world was headed in that kind of positive orientation, but at the same time, there was already this kind of backlash building. And the 1970s was going to be the decade when we decided between those two things, I think. And unfortunately, I think we made the wrong and selfish decision.
We're talking to Bill McKibben about his latest. It's called The Flag, the Cross, and the Station Wagon. A graying American looks back at his suburban boyhood and wonders what the hell happened.
Well, I learned a lot about you in this book, Bill McKibben. I also learned about your kumbaya around the campfire when you were very active in your church groups as a kid growing up. And I also learned that you were down there at the beginning of what we learned as kind of the white evangelical movement, doing stories about Tammy Baker and her husband and talking about the role of the change in Christianity, not just in people's observation or being involved in religion, but in how the radicalness of Christianity is all but lost today. So tell us a little bit about that section of the book.
Well, look, I think basically the same thing happened in the religious world as in the secular and political one. In 1970, 52% of Americans belonged to what we called one of the mainline Protestant denominations. They were Presbyterian, Methodist, Lutheran, Episcopalian. I was a Congregationalist, Hancock United Church of Christ on the Green there in Lexington. And these churches, for whatever their faults, were part of that same project, that project of building a better society. And they took it seriously. Those are those churches all were helping out as the Vietnam veterans came to protest against the war. Most of them were involved in that fight for affordable housing. By 1980, those numbers had begun to drop very sharply. Now that 52% is about 13% of the population. And it's been replaced, to the extent that it's been replaced at all, by an evangelical church that has a much more transactional relationship, a much more one-on-one, personalized, individualized relationship with God and the idea of salvation, and has either backed away from the project of building a better society or has taken it in deeply reactionary directions. And really, you've seen the kind of confluence of this political and religious shift at work in the last few weeks. Those Supreme Court decisions, late in the term, the ones about guns, the ones about choice, the ones about EPA and the Clean Air Act, the ones about voting rights, are basically all aimed at things that happened in this short period of time, from the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to Roe v. Wade in 1973. And the reaction to it has been a long time building, but it began right then in those years. And it began in part just because that incredible wealth machine that was the suburbs started making people much richer. I tell the story in the book of time in the middle of the 1970s when, as a very young reporter at the Lexington Minuteman, I did a story about the fact that the average house in Lexington had passed the $100,000 mark. And the realtors that I were talking to were completely upfront about what that meant. One said, up until recently, there's been a very liberal trend here, but once they're in the boat and a property holder, they tend to become more conservative. This town has a reputation for being relatively progressive, but when push comes to shove, property values prevail. Remember, it was by the end of this decade, 1978, that California passed Proposition 13, the first of the tax revolts, followed by Prop 2.5 in Massachusetts in 1980, the same night that Ronald Reagan won.
And Ronald Reagan was sort of the culmination and beginning, if that's an oxymoronic, of the transition to what we have today. No, Bill McKibben?
Absolutely. The most important political figure of our lifetimes, and the one in whose shadow we still live. Barack Obama last year asked in an interview why he got so little done when he had 60 senators at the beginning of his term, said, well, we were still felt constrained by the world that Ronald Reagan had created, this idea that markets solve all problems. Joe Biden is, I think actually trying to sort of overcome that at the moment. But as you noted in the introduction, it's not going very well, thanks to the Republican Party and Mr. Manchin.
Well, at the end of the title of your book, What the Hell Happened? We're going to deal with the what the hell happened with Manchin and the court in a second. One last thing about the book. I can't tell you, Bill McKibben, how many times Marjorie and I have been embarrassed in the last, 5 years about the history of this country that we don't know. And a piece of your thing here that stayed with me is we all know about Paul Revere. Everybody in the audience knows about Paul Revere. We learned it in school. It's a local kind of phenomenon. But you exposed us to Mark Codman. I never heard of Mark Codman.
Neither had I.
What does he have to do with Paul Revere?
Look, this blew my mind too. Blew it hard. So I was doing, as you say, I'd been a guide on Lexington Green when I was in junior high school. Tourists would come in by the busload, and I would lead them around and tell them the story of the brave Minutemen standing up to imperialism and colonialism, and they were brave, and it was an important moment and a real strike for liberty. But when I was going back and looking back over that history, I was reading Revere's own account of his ride, the account that he wrote 20 years afterward that became the sort of source text for Longfellow's iconic poem. And Revere's describing, I'm on my horse and there's two British officers and we're galloping around and I managed to give them the slip, and it was right under the place on Charlestown Common where Mark hung in chains. He just said this in passing. And clearly it was a reference he expected everyone to know without any explanation. Well, I'd never heard the story, and really I think not many people have, because it took a lot of digging to even get at it, and there's not much written about it. But 20 years before the Revolution, and there were a lot of slaves in Massachusetts in those days, one of them, a man named Mark Codman, had a particularly brutal master. He poisoned him in hopes that he might get a more lenient master. Instead of being charged with murder, he was charged with treason. His body was drawn and quartered and then placed in an iron cage, a gibbet, and hung above Charlestown Common, where his body stayed for 40 years as a reminder not to be insubordinate. It was such a obvious landmark that everybody knew just what Revere was talking about. When you read that, I gotta say, it does put the Sons of Liberty in a slightly different perspective. It does shadow and nuance our understanding of what people were, standing up for on Lexington Green. And it does help explain, I think, the kind of currents of American history that ended up with people voting against affordable housing, 200 years later.
Made the connection for me. We're talking to Bill McKibben.
Bill McKibben, lots of people, including you, I believe, were hoping after the climate expectations of some money toward it went down when Joe Manchin once again vetoed Joe Biden's plans to do something. That I think you thought that the president might declare a climate emergency when he went to Somerset and stood by the Brayton power plant, which had pumped coal into Somerset in my hometown, Fall River, for years. He didn't do it. What do you make of that?
Well, I think at this point we're learning that one thing about the Biden administration is speed is not its hallmark. So he went and gave like the beginning of a tremendous speech. He talked about we were in an emergency and it was code red for humanity, and on and on and on. And he set up the joke really well, but the punchline didn't land because all he had to offer was Wednesday was some money reappropriated around FEMA for some cooling centers and some more leasing of offshore land for wind. Useful things, but very small bore. The word within the White House is that this fight is well underway. John Kerry said yesterday that we're definitely going to have a climate emergency soon. I just wrote a piece this morning going through the 72 other emergency declarations that presidents have made since FDR, some of them for important things. FDR's bank holiday right after 9/11 to get the National Guard spun up and things, but a lot of them for things somewhat less daunting than the climate crisis. Trying to get at autocrats in the Ivory Coast, say, required a presidential emergency declaration. So people are hopeful that now that Manchin has closed off the legislative option, that Biden will get his courage up and use the executive option to at least do something. He can't do the things. He can't provide the hundreds of billions of dollars that Build Back Better bill would have provided, and that's what we probably need most. But he can do something.
Speaking of something, in the piece you wrote about, I don't know if it was the alert you sent out, tell President Biden, declare a climate emergency now, or one of the things you wrote, whatever it was, you link, I'm saying to Marjorie, so what would declaring climate emergency mean? And then the next sentence I read is, click here, Sheldon Whitehouse, the senator from Rhode Island we've had on many times, talking about dark money, lays out, explain to people in common language here, what would the declaration of a climate emergency by Joe Biden mean, Bill McKibben?
It would give him more powers to repurpose money from elsewhere in the federal government to spend on some of these priorities, not money in the kind of sums that Build Back Better bill would do. It would allow him to stop the flow of financial capital around the world to back fossil fuel projects. It would let him stop the export of crude oil around the world, which might actually do something to slow down the gas prices too. It would allow him, he may already have this power, but it would make it easier to stop new leases for offshore oil and gas, make it less challengeable in court, which I'm afraid is an important thing one has to think about these days. So it would be important. I mean, and above all, it would send a very strong signal to the rest of the world that Joe Manchin is not going to determine America's climate policy, that we're actually, dealing with or trying to deal with what is, by any stretch of the word, an emergency. Think about the last week.
Yes.
We've had savage heat wave across China. We've had savage heat wave across much of the U.S., 100 million people under heat advisories, and we've had a truly historic heat wave across Europe. You remember last year we talked about this heat dome that settled over the Pacific Northwest and where Canada broke its old temperature record by a mind-boggling 8 degrees. Well, in the UK, which has the longest temperature records on planet Earth, going back to the 17th century, they managed, just think about that statistically for a minute. That means there are tens of thousands of daily records. If you were ever going to break one, it's pretty unlikely at this point, but if you do, you were going to break it by 1/10 of a degree, because that's how statistics work. Instead, on Tuesday, Britain smashed its old temperature record by 3 degrees Fahrenheit. That scares the dickens out of scientists, because what it means is things are happening fast. And just to add to that, this record comes in a year when the Pacific is cool. We're in a La Nina phase, which generally depresses temperatures worldwide. When we next go into an El Nino phase sometime in the next couple of years, Katie, bar the door. We're going to see global temperatures like we've never seen before. So emergency is almost too calm a word to describe what we're undergoing at the moment.
So, Bill McKibben, I'm assuming the question I'm about to ask is the question you're asked most often. Okay, so the EPA, the Supreme Court made sure that the EPA can't do its job. Joe Manchin made sure that Congress can't do its job. So what do the rest of us do in the context of this retreat by at least parts of Washington? What do we do?
Well, one thing to do this week is to put some pressure on the president, to give him some support, to show that we have that we want him to take executive action. With third act, we've got this alert that went out. It's easy to send him a message. The message I sent him was, Mr. President, sorry to hear you're under the weather. So's the rest of the planet. Let's get to work. So that's one thing. Another thing is to take on the other lever big enough to matter. We've talked about this before, but it's the financial industry. Yeah. Right now, for instance, in Boston, Liberty Mutual is deciding whether or not, whether or not they're providing the funding for a huge Canadian tar sands pipeline, providing insurance for it. And so people have been pressuring them to say no. And on a larger scale, we're pressuring all the big banks in the country to end their just indiscriminate lending to the fossil fuel industry. So there are avenues left to work on, And there's reason to think that if we do that work, that we still can make real progress. Look, the thing that makes this also crazy and maddening is that compared even with 10 years ago, the price of renewable energy is falling 90%. It's not expensive anymore. We could do this if we can get past the twin demons of inertia, always a problem in human affairs, and vested interest, which is the deepest problem here.
You know, Bill, one last thing about the bank thing, just for a second. For those of us who, I assume, say, and I'm one of them, so I'm not talking about other people, that's great, I support that. You go do it, I'll join thirdact.org. But there's an act I assume we can all take. Aren't you urging people by the end of the year to just cut up their credit cards from the bank? Well,
but here's the thing. Don't do it by yourself. I mean, Jim, you're probably wealthy enough that Chase Bank will notice if you cut up your credit card.
Maybe.
But for most of us, I'm afraid it just falls, if we do it by ourselves, as with so many things, it falls within that kind of churn, you know, that doesn't show up. But if we do it together, we can make some noise. And so that's what we're doing at Third Act, and lots of other people are joining in. We're going to have a big Scissors Day at the end of the year, and it'll be fun and powerful, and it'll help launch the next phases of this, because that big lever, the marked money, is one we've got to keep pulling, and pulling hard.
Bill McKibben, I know that Third Act is aimed at older people, but certainly all this information, if people want to go to the website, they can find out all about what you're doing there. Give us the website.
Thirdact.org, and yes, even people who haven't had the good fortune to turn 60 yet are welcome.
They're allowed.
Join us.
Hey, Bill, your book is spectacular. Everybody should buy it and read it, and it's really thoughtful and great.
And I love that you're a big fan of Peter Gomes. He used to be over at Harvard, because I thought he was one of the great speakers and great writers. And I love.
It was I'll just say, it was a real pleasure to get to go back mentally into Boston and the suburbs around it at a different period of time and really think about it. And it reminded me of how much I love that part of the world and New England in general. So, and you guys are a huge part of that. Thank you for keeping all this alive.
Well, you know how you can thank us, Bill? Next time, instead of wearing your Red Sox hat, can you wear the tri-cornered hat that you used? Maybe not.
We didn't even get to talk about poor Chris Sale, the Job of basketball pitchers.
For those who don't know, this man is a huge Red Sox fan. Bill McKibben, it's great to talk to you as always. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you guys very much.
Another great book. Bill McKibben is an author,
book is fabulous, educator,
and it's wonderful. Founder of 350.org and thirdact.org. He's a newsletter on Substack, which is also terrific. It's titled The Crucial Years, and his latest book, as we just talked about, is The Flag, the Cross, and the Station Wagon. Boy, fond members of station wagons, Jim. A graying American looks back at his suburban boyhood and wonders what the hell happened, and don't we all?
Before we leave this segment, speaking of station wagon, I meant to say this today. Gail Collins, who we've had on the show, who is an editorial writer for the Boston Globe. 80 times in her career.
That's right.
When Mitt Romney was running for president, what did she mention 80 times?
She mentioned that he strapped Seamus to the roof of their station wagon and drove from here to Canada.
Yes, he did.
Like
Today, 8 columnists for the New York Times are asked to write about what they got wrong, what was wrong that they wrote about through the years. Her column is all about the 80 times she wrote about Seamus on the roof of the Romney station wagon. You should really check it out. It is terrific.
Thank you again to Bill McKibben. We really appreciate his time. After a quick break, tech companies want nothing more for you to do than to ditch your 5-year-old laptop or smartphone. Our tech authority, Andy Nacco, has a plan for keeping perfectly good tech out of the landfill. He's going to talk about that and other headlines. We're talking here at the Boston Public Library, where we broadcast every Friday and every Tuesday. You listen to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio.
The big stories in Massachusetts politics, with fresh insight, all in one place. The GBH News Politics Newsletter. with Soraya Wintersmith, Adam Riley, Peter Katzis, and Katie Lanning. Bringing the latest goings-on from City Hall to the State House right to your inbox. The policy and how it all affects you. Sign up today at gbhnews.org/newsletters.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Ocean State Job Lot, committed to partnering with customers to help provide brighter futures to children throughout the Northeast. Learn more at oceanstatejoblot.com. That's oceanstatejoblot.com. And Compass on the Bay, an assisted living community in South Boston for those with Alzheimer's and related dementias, with research-based therapeutic programming for those with memory loss. More at compassonthebay.com/reconnect.
Trusted. Local. News. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We are 20 minutes away from music, so do not go away, and it is really great. We've gotten taste. Joined now via Zoom by Andy Ihnatko. Andy's a tech writer and blogger. You can find his work at ihnatko.com. That's IHNATKO. Or follow him at Ihnatko. Hey there, Andy Ihnatko.
Hey there, hi there, ho there.
And to you too.
Hey, Andy Ihnatko, it's funny you should be doing this story about people trying to get you to turn in your older stuff, because I was trying to replace some bad earbuds at the Apple store yesterday. They kept telling me how old and what a mess my phone was and blaming the phone. It wasn't the phone, it was the earbuds. But in any case, you talk about closets, basements, and landfills full of laptops and desktops that are really working okay, but what?
Yeah, I mean, you have the obsolescence of computers is actually not defined by things breaking down. They're usually defined by Microsoft or Apple, whatever company is making the operating system that it relies on, just stop ending support for it. So at some point, for instance, the new apps that come out for the Mac, the new apps that come out for Windows just won't work with this old machine anymore. And by old, I can mean like 5 or 6 years old. Worse, because they're not going to update the operating system, if these companies stopped updating it in 2015, it means that none of the security updates that have been released since 2015 are also going to affect it. So it becomes very, very insecure. So that's why most people, they'll throw it in a closet or put it in the recycling or put it in a landfill. But Google has this really cool new operating system that's designed to combat that. You can just take an old machine out of the closet. This is literally an old MacBook from 2012 that's been obsolete for years. I actually bought it at the MIT flea market a couple years ago for $10. And now I've got a completely modern operating system on it, courtesy of Google, and it's totally free.
So can mere mortals do what you're... I mean, by the way, as you know, I'm going to tell people and you something that is no surprise. I am as tech unsavvy as they come, but I have at least 3, if not 4 computers that I thought had expired sitting in a closet or the basement of my house. Could I do what you're describing here, Andy Ihnatko?
Very much so. It's not the most trivial thing. It's not like replacing a light bulb. However, it's a it's a simple process. You just get a flash drive, a USB thumb drive. You download this installer app from Google's cloud website. Prepare this little flash drive that'll be placed on it all the software that it needs to boot up these old machines. So as a matter of fact, you don't even have to install it on this computer. All you got to do is stick that thumb drive that you've prepared inside a USB port, and then boot off that thumb drive, and immediately it'll start running this Chrome OS that's already on so many laptops already. And if you like it, there's an installer app on that thumb drive that will wipe out the hard drive of the device you've got it into, and basically reconfigure it, reinstall it as a Chrome OS computer. So it's not the simplest thing in the world, but it's very, very linear, and I think that most people can handle it very easily. You know, one last thing about this, beyond the fact you make a point and a note to us that obviously it's environmentally important because of landfills. These things are there in mountains. The other thing is we read almost every week about the digital divide in this country. Those that have computers, those that don't, who need them probably to try to level the playing field, don't. Why aren't there organizations that say, based on this simple technology you're talking about, bring us all your old computers that you thought were tuckered out and unusable,
And in fact, with this modest adjustment, we can make them all usable for somebody who doesn't have a computer.
There are some, but mostly they're local and grassroots, and that's only because that problem, before Chrome OS Flex, it's been a really complicated problem to solve. There's so many different varieties of computers that this is a 10-year-old computer, but still it's relatively modern. It would be very difficult for a community organization to suddenly open up the floodgates, and suddenly they're getting all of these terrible, terrible old machines that really are just completely knackered and just can't work, and processing these, getting rid of all the data so that the personal data on these machines is removed securely. There are a lot of small things that would have to be done to do that, but I agree it would be great if individual states decided to create essentially a central clearinghouse. And I won't get into the story, but MIT, for instance, at one point actually had a warehouse where every time that a department had computers they weren't using anymore, it went into this warehouse, and if you were an educator, you can essentially get this catalog of, hey, they've got 100 Dell Xperia desktops. Great, we need 20 for this lab. Can we have them? They say, great, give us the paperwork. We'll give them to you.
And this is free, by the way. I'm sorry. This is free, this deal?
Chrome Flex is free.
Free, okay.
I'll put the URL for where to get the download in my Twitter feed.
Oh, great.
Go to
Add a Notco. Great.
We're talking to Andy Notco, our tech man. So I think as you asked if we thought that purchasing things like games and movies meant we owned it in your memo to us, and apparently those of us who thought that were mistaken.
Yeah, see, the thing is, when you buy things digitally, whether you're buying a Kindle book, whether you're buying a TV series or a movie through the iTunes store, when you're buying a game, technically speaking, you're not buying anything. All you're doing is you're buying a license to use this thing that you're either downloading to your device or that you're streaming off of this company's servers. And they can the user agreement actually says that, hey, we can actually rescind this right at any time. So essentially, it doesn't matter that you spent thousands of dollars on content in our store. We could basically pull the plug on that and just not even give you any sort of a refund. And just in the past couple of weeks, we saw a couple of really bad examples of that. It's an ongoing thing. It's a real thing.
What kind of examples without giving us a headache? What do you mean?
Sure. Sony, when they had the PlayStation, they decided they had a PlayStation store, and for a while they decided to compete with all these online stores and say, hey, we can buy movies through your own game console. They shut that down last year because it wasn't really working out. So this year, just last week, they announced that, hey, if you bought our agreement with Studio Canal, the fourth biggest movie distributor in the world, with a huge catalog, our agreement with that company expired. So at the end of August, any Studio Canal movies that you bought, which includes the Paddington movies, the Bridget Jones movies, all kinds of stuff, are just going to disappear from your library. You can't have them anymore. And Sony hasn't even said whether or not you're going to get a refund for all the money you spent on this stuff. It's just going to go.
Is there a workaround? What do we do if we actually do want to own one of these things? Is there a way to do that or no?
I'm accidentally glad that I'm going from home. This is literally a stack of physical media next to my computer. Anytime there's a movie that I want to own for keeps, like here's the Joker movie, here's the Superman movie.
Thank you for holding them up. Thank you, very nice.
I'm sorry. Yes, we're doing a theater.
I like
of the
that.
air.
I like that.
Actually, people can see it. Here's their library or streaming.
Vita.
A CD of Vita. If I want it for keeps, I will actually buy it. As a matter of fact, I can also buy it for used on eBay. So
a physical,
for pennies.
obviously a physical thing.
If I buy it on physical media, and in most cases, like with CDs, I can actually rip this to digital, and so I will have them as an completely unlocked digital file, so I can put it on my phone, put it on a device like this digital Sony Walkman. For movies, there are ways of taking a Blu-ray disc and converting it to an unlocked, completely open video format that you can then play on anything. Or in my case, I put it on a file server that's behind. The reason why there's the screen is that's my real office behind there, and I ain't letting nobody see exactly how filthy my office is.
Okay, but that's okay.
But there's a media server. There's a media server behind there that has all my data on it. But really, if you want to own it forever, you have to own the physical media. You have to buy the book.
So I'm just not sure I understand this completely. If you are getting buying movies through your internet provider, whether it's RCN, whatever it is, or Comcast, and you buy them as opposed to renting them because you buy them because you watch them a lot at Christmas.
Or because they give you no choice. Sometimes you don't have you don't have the choice to rent. You must buy if you want to see it.
So those are not yours either. They could disappear at any moment should your provider decide to take them back.
Exactly. Again, they're not selling you the movie. They're selling you the right to play that movie through a bunch of conditions, including it's protected by rights management, so you can't copy it. You can't back it up in case they decide to pull it from your library. You can't choose another player to use. I'm in that sort of situation right now with Comixology. Is the only store you can buy digital comics right now. It really is the only store. And so you have to use their comic book reader app, which used to be very, very good, but then the company got bought out by Amazon, and now they're forcing you to use like Amazon's Kindle reader, and it's not very good. But unfortunately, I've got thousands of dollars worth of comics I've purchased over 10 years, but I have to use this terrible reader. If they had been unlocked files, open files that could be read by any sort of a device I want, I could say, well, gee, this new Kindle reader is terrible. I'm going to find a competing reader that's actually much, much better for me. But,
can we stay on this a second? Because
this is
aggravating. It is outrageous.
It's really
so
outrageous.
I understand that I'm sure, and you probably told us this and I forgot, the way they get away with this is because it's in the fine print that you agreed to when you made the purchase that wasn't really a purchase. However, it seems to me that if somebody litigated this damn thing, I've had many experiences that I described to Marjorie. I have Comcast in Cambridge. I want to rent a movie for $3.99. I really want to see it, and rent isn't an option. I click on a thing that says buy.
Exactly.
Buy, to me, means own at the end of the thing.
Right.
It is hard for me to believe that litigation would not end up in the common usage of the term overriding the fine print that nobody has ever read. I'm being naive, obviously, yes?
No, you're absolutely right, and that's the reason why at some point, there used to be a point where if you went to the iTunes store, there used to be a buy button next to things that you would buy. A few years ago, though, they quietly changed that to get for exactly that reason, because they were starting to get complaints saying that what is the definition of buy? And this is, it's really, I agree with you. It's as frustrating as all hell, because copyright law, for instance, gives you two conflicting laws here. For instance, it says that if I buy this movie in one format, or an album on CD, it is perfectly legal for me to make a copy of it for backup purposes, to make a copy of it so I can listen to it on a cassette or listen to it on a Walkman. That's perfectly legal. That is a right that I've been given by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. However, another part of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act says that if a piece of media has been protected with digital rights management, an anti-piracy technology.
Thank you.
I'm trying to get a deal.
You're doing great.
I love it's a show and tell situation, Jim. We love it.
Prop comic. But because this Blu-ray is protected by digital rights management, I have the right to copy this into a digital format so I can play it on my iPad, play it on my server.
Okay.
But I don't have the right to break the copy protection that prevents me from doing that. That's piracy. So it's ridiculous.
I have one last practical question that probably matters more than all this discussion. Marjorie's a little too shy to bring this up. There is a movie that she thinks she owns. Can we play a little bit from it, please? Do we have it?
He is moving like a tremendous machine.
What's that called again?
That would be Secretariat.
Now, does she really own the movie Secretariat, or does she not? Yes
I
or
will be
no?
devastated if they try to take that away
Okay,
from
let's
me.
forget that. We're talking to Andy Anatko, our tech guy. Thank you for that.
This is another thing that seems
By the way, Gail Collins mentioned Seamus the dog 80 times. We have played Secretariat 80,000 times on the show, and we're still not done.
Want a feel-good movie? Make you feel good?
Secretariat.
Secretariat.
Greatest movie
is your
ever.
Ticket.
Can I quickly tell you that my friend, the late Bill Knack, was the official biographer of Secretariat. He was there when Secretariat was born. He was there when Secretariat died.
Marjorie.
You definitely go on YouTube, have him go find any of his talks about Secretariat. He is an amazing storyteller.
I'm writing this down.
She's leaving now,
Mac,
actually. It's
M-A-C-K?
N as in Nancy, A-C-K. He is a legendary sports writer. He was with the New York Daily News and then Sports Illustrated for years. He is a
tremendous
legend.
machine.
I know what I'll be doing this weekend. Looking at Bill
we only
Knack.
have a couple of minutes.
Okay,
This third one we want to get to, though.
A couple of minutes. This is another thing that seems really terrible. That the big book industry doesn't want to have libraries lending ebooks anymore. So what's going on?
Yeah, see, this is a similar thing. Libraries have specific carve-outs. I'm not saying that they litigated and they decided this. I'm saying that when copyright law was set up, a lot of exemptions were specifically and explicitly made for libraries because copyright law did not want to get in the way of libraries' mission of lending books and sharing information. So, for instance, when a library can acquire a book just by buying a book and then putting it on the shelf. They don't have to deal with the publisher directly at all. But the weird thing is, when you get an ebook through a library, they can't buy these ebooks. The publishers wanted to create this brand new revenue stream for themselves. All they do is, again, they don't sell the ebook. They lease it to an intermediate company, which then signs a contract and a lease to the library. So essentially, if you bought a copy of like Jenny Hand's The Summer I Turned Pretty, which my sisters tell me is the book of the summer, if the library bought it from any bookstore, they would have it in their collections forever. However, as an ebook, the term expires, then they have to pay to renew it, so at some point it disappears. So this principle is being challenged by the four main publishing groups. The Internet Archive has this project called Open Library. It tries to be legally and responsibility-wise the exact duplicate of a digital library. And for that reason, you can sign out Jenny Hand's The Summer I Turned Pretty off of this website that isn't necessarily a physical library because they actually, it sounds funny, but they physically buy a copy. They buy a copy that's shipped to Open Library. They put it in a scanner that they built themselves. They create their own ebook, and then they lend it out by the same token that regular library books are lent out. You have to be on a wait list. You get to have it for a certain amount of time. It's copy protected, so you can't duplicate it, and when the time's up, you lose it. Now, this lawsuit is basically saying, hey, these people are just nasty pirates. They're just stealing books, and they're redistributing this on a horrible. They have to be shut down. They want to be sued. They want to sue them for enough money that essentially the Open Library Project would be shut down and would not be able to pay for this lawsuit, or they would also like to shut down their service of scanning books for libraries. Right now, libraries can pay them to actually scan their actual media and make them available without having to pay these main publishers. There was a big lawsuit 2 years ago that came about because of COVID. Admittedly, Open Library overstepped their bounds. When all the libraries shut down, they took it upon themselves to say, hey, normally we only lend out one copy of an ebook for every physical copy that we have in storage. We're gonna just get rid of that during the state of emergency because people during the pandemic. That was illegal, so they sued based on that. But this was just an opportunity that these publishers had to try to shut them down and have them defined as pirates. So right now it's heating up because last week the publishers asked for a summary judgment to say, hey, we think we've proven our case. Just shut them down, please, courts, and give us our win, and then let us basically establish that libraries do not have the right to, do not have this legally defined right to copy a book into a format that they can then lend. And then there's the Electronic Frontier Foundation is defending the Open Library. They have a wonderful amicus brief of 10 different copyright lawyers that explain why the publishers are full of it. It would be a terrible, terrible thing if they lose this lawsuit because libraries will lose a protection they've specifically been granted by copyright law.
It's huge. Thanks for bringing us up to speed. Andy Anatko, it's great to see you. Excellent exhibits during the interview.
The show and tell part was my favorite. Andy Anatko, thank you very much. Talk to you soon. Andy Anatko is a tech writer and blogger. You can find his work at Inatko, IHNATKO, Inatko.com. Coming up, Live Music Fridays are back at the Boston Public Library. We're going to be joined next by the Black Hole Symphony. You do not want to miss this. They're next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Billy Porter's directorial debut is a Gen Z romantic comedy. A young boy named Cole falls in love with his classmate, Kelsa, played by Eva Rain.
This film is just your typical boy meets girl, and the girl happens to be trans.
Actor Eva Rain on working with Billy Porter and telling a story close to home. This afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Little Leaf Farms, committed to transforming the way food is grown in New England. Fresh lettuce harvested daily in Massachusetts all year round. It's the local lettuce locals love. Learn more at littleleaffarms.com. And Comcast Business, offering Security Edge, an internet security solution that helps block threats like malware, ransomware, phishing, and botnet attacks across all connected devices. Restrictions apply. ComcastBusiness.com.
Next time on The World,
2 billion. That's the number of people in the world right now who have never heard the name of Jesus.
Evangelical missionaries spread the gospel to indigenous people in Brazil, and President Jair Bolsonaro's government has opened the door to them so they can bring their faith to the Amazon. But it may be less about saving people's souls and more about developing their land. Our story on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marge Reagan, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. If you're streaming this, you lost out. In the spring of 2019, the world got its first ever glimpse of a real black hole, whatever that is. You'll remember it looks sort of like a black and orange coffee stain, at least to me. But of course, black holes are so much more than those fuzzy photos suggest. And there are few people with a better understanding of the wonder of black holes than our next guests, who've created a new experience at the great Museum of Science they've dubbed the Black Hole Symphony. We're going to talk to the leaders in a minute, but rather, with no further ado, as the saying goes, here is the Black Hole Symphony led by David Ibbett, playing Sound of Gravity. Welcome to you all. Sound of Gravity, Black Hole Symphony. You're going to hear more from them in a couple of seconds. We're going to talk to their leaders, though, first. James Monroe is the senior producer, adult programs and theater experiences at the Museum of Science. That was a hell of an experience already. David Ibbott, who was leading that little ensemble, is the founder of the Multiverse Concert Series and composer of the Black Hole Symphony. Gentlemen, it's great to meet you both. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure to be here. Oh my gosh, I feel like I've been on the James Webb Telescope.
You really do. It so captures
Very
that.
timely.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So let's start with you, David. You wrote this. I mean, tell us what the Black Hole Symphony is about.
Well, it's an audio-visual symphony that takes place inside a planetarium, and it takes audiences on this journey straight to the heart of a black hole galaxy, and it's currently running in the Museum of Science, Boston, this summer with our counterpart,
And James, it's an immersive thing. We've talked a lot about immersive experiences with artists, for example, with Jared Bowen of late. This is an immersive deal at the planetarium.
Totally immersive, and it brings audiences closer to a black hole than they ever probably imagined they could be. And it's told, driven by the music of David, his incredible score, played by a live chamber ensemble of the Multiverse Players, and then these incredible state-of-the-art 360 visuals that were developed by our team at the Museum of Science that sort of envelop the audience fully all above and around them.
And James, my understanding is the dates were sold out, but today, additional tickets are being made available today in honor of your being here for August 25th. Is
Exactly.
that not correct?
The full run sold out very
Great.
quickly, but due to demand, we are adding one more performance on August 25th at 9 p.m., and tickets are on sale now, and we wanted to give all of your listeners the first chance to grab them.
Oh,
So,
good.
David.
Wait a minute. How do they grab them? Where do they go?
They go to mos.org/adults.
Okay,
MOS.org/adult. So you're quoted in a Globe story there. That you don't know anything about science, I assume, correct?
Well, I'm trained as a classical musician.
I know, but you don't know anything about science.
I grew up in a house of science.
Oh, you did?
So, well, I guess I'm a passionate amateur
Okay, so I'm
scientist.
going to quote from you from the Globe. You turn frequencies of light into sound waves based on the electromagnetic spectrum of an active galaxy containing a supermassive black hole. Respectfully, what the hell are you talking about? What is that?
Well, I had a lot of help, I will say.
Okay.
So I have a partner who's a scientist, Anna Varnatska, at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, and we've been working on this for 3 years. And I'm a composer, but I'd love to hear about science. And what a city to be in, to hear about science. So much of it's happening here. So it started off with conversations between me and a scientist, and together we figured out ways that you can use your ears to really experience science in a way that you can't unless you have a lot of training to know how to read graphs and data. It's out of reach for a lot people who don't have a science background.
Okay, so why don't you start inching your way back to, you're going to conduct this next one too,
Yeah,
right?
that's
You
right.
inch that way, and we'll
Okay.
talk to James while you and your players are getting set up there.
Yeah, I want to understand when you say, so we would go to the planetarium
Yes.
and where you sit and look up at this incredible display of the sky and then hear this incredible music.
Yes.
But it's geared toward grown-ups, that's why it's at night?
Yes, so it's a part of our Subspace brand of programming at the museum, which is aimed at engaging 18-plus audiences, always after hours, for adults to come and experience and engage with current science and technology in ways that are relevant to adults.
Yeah.
And so this is a part of our Summer Thursdays lineup, which every Thursday night we are sort of offering a new nightlife experience or event in our immersive theater, so the Planetarium or the Omni, and Black Hole Symphony is at the heart and the centerpiece of our summer lineup.
Because normally if you go to the planetarium, are you hearing anything? What are you hearing normally?
Well, it's all usually during the day. It's all playback, so there is music, there's a score, and there's
Yeah.
narration. But at night, we've really turned the planetarium into a live performance venue for local Boston artists to really experiment and create with, and this is a prime and perfect example of that.
Okay, so David Ibbott is back at the conductor's podium. This is Dance of the Merging Black Holes. Did I get this one right? Here it is, Black Hole Symphony playing Dance of the Merging Black Holes.
Okay. I never heard sounds like that coming out of a cello in my life.
David, you're coming back over
yeah,
here,
well,
right?
David, we want to come over here and introduce your performers because that was the piccolo and the flute.
That's my
and the
favorite part of the
incredible
show as well, by the way.
cello?
Or that number
That
that,
whole
we just
number.
heard.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is fantastic.
Everything.
So
Who are the players?
Tell us about your musicians.
Okay, yeah, so we've got the mini version of the orchestra, but they're the heart of the orchestra here today. So the cellist, Johnny Mock, he's playing gravitational waves there.
That was incredible.
So we've got gravitational waves, those get let out when two black holes merge and they travel light years through space and eventually to us on Earth. And these we can pick these up, and then he's playing them on the cello as they go up and down. And then next to him is Jessica Smith on piccolo and flute. And she gets to be, the very high frequencies, the X-rays and the gamma rays that come out of a black hole galaxy. And then next to her is Agnes Kirkley Cox, who you heard a little bit. You're going to hear more of her.
Incredible voice.
Yeah, she's the voice of the universe in this project.
What was it ever? My God, yeah. It's incredible. So, do either of you, did I ask you this already? I don't think so. The only thing that we know less about Marjorie and me than Bitcoin or black holes. I mean, you probably sort of captured the essence of whatever hell a black hole is with those beautiful places. Do you have any idea what a black hole is, David?
Well, I've learned a ton doing this project, and it's a joy for me to be around scientists, and they love to talk about their work, but they feel like science is sort of shut off, and I think it's for everyone, and especially musicians. We're always looking for inspiration. You've got your blank page. What do I write? I've got to write a sonata. I've got.
So, in light of the fact you really never answered my question, you don't know what a black hole is either. Do you have any idea what a black hole is, James? Tell the truth.
I have no idea what a black hole is. There's tons of educators at the Museum of Science that do, though, but it goes over my head. But I think the general public, there's so much mystery around them, but there is so much that we do know about the science, and you'll learn that by coming to the show.
Even though it's here, and all we care about is here, and the planetarium, but I haven't been in years. The museum is one of the greats ever, and the planetarium is insanely great. But you can't do this anywhere else, right?
That's not true.
Oh, it's not true?
Well, you can do it in other planetariums. You can't do it anywhere else in Boston. That's why our experience is so unique and singular. But we built this show to tour. So we want to have it. We wanted to have ongoing life here in Boston, and we wanted to go off to different planetariums around the country. And we're already in talks with several institutions to bring the show and do a run of the show in 2023.
I just wondered, James, if I mentioned the James Webb Telescope, feeling like I was riding around in there when I listened to you. But does something like that, a breakthrough in astrology like that, how does that impact the planetarium?
It makes us cool. And I think that's what's really exciting about discoveries like that and groundbreaking research, because the general public realizes, oh my gosh, science is all around us. And it is cool and it is interesting. And so it's always a victory for us when stuff like that happens.
And David, I wondered, before you were composing for outer space, what did you have a specialty that you did?
Well, I grew up, my dad's a polymer chemist, so I grew up
Whatever a
around,
polymer is.
I've actually got some polymer music coming up in the future.
No, you don't.
Well,
you really do?
We're working on it.
What's a polymer?
It's a chain of small molecules making a big one. So the most famous is probably DNA.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's embarrassing.
The DNA Symphony, that's coming next.
Yes.
I think you should make the mRNA for the vaccines, right? Maybe if you get that.
We're just full of inspiration, from seeing this one come to life, in the museum, and it's been a dream, about three years of work to make this happen.
I'm going to say something incredibly stupid, but why not? It's late on a Friday. Often we have people playing music here, and they say the theme is X, and the music is beautiful. I have no idea what the connection with the music. Your stuff is so captures the essence of what you're trying to. It is insane.
Yeah.
Well, that's.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, the third. Get over there, David. They're going to play a third selection as we end this segment here. This is the Black Hole Symphony, and as James said a minute ago, tell us the website one more time, James.
MOS.org/adults.
And it's a special performance released today. It was all sold out in honor of them being kind enough to join us here today. MOS.org/adults. August 25th, you said 9 o'clock?
At 9 o'clock, yes.
9 o'clock. This final piece that you're performing, David and Jessica and Agnes and Johnny, Waves Coming Home. Am I right again? Waves Coming Home, Black Hole Symphony.
That was absolutely fantastic. I mean, is that incredible? Where are you now? You're like in outer space. Or a psychedelic experience. Or maybe some magic mushrooms or something like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. You were fabulous.
Thank
really
you so much.
appreciate
That
it.
was really a treat, you guys, and amazing stuff. Thank you for being here. James Monroe is the senior producer, adult programs and theater experiences at the Museum of Science. David Ibbett is the founder of the Multiverse Concert Series and composer of the Black Hole Symphony. And we're grateful to members of the Black Hole Symphony that showed up with us today.
Can I say their names one more time?
Absolutely.
Jessica Smith on flute and piccolo, brilliant. Agnes Copley Cox, soprano. Johnny Mock on cello. And we should have mentioned, in addition to our own wonderful engineers, Vincent Leroux with them as well to help make this happen. All of you, that was spectacular. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
And one more time, you can get tickets if you want to see this yourself or hear this, moss.org. That's MOS.org. Okay, thank you very much. It was a thrill to have you guys here. Coming up,
so much.
We talked earlier about Cape Cod's hidden gems. We're going to open the lines to hear your favorite places down on Cape Cod. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
In Georgia, both candidates for the U.S. Senate are black men. This has only happened once before, in the 2004 U.S. Senate race in Illinois between Alan Keyes and this future president.
So, let's get to work.
We're talking about the Warnock-Walker matchup and what it tells us about American politics. Next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Compass on the Bay, an assisted living community in South Boston dedicated to those with Alzheimer's and related dementias, featuring research-based therapeutic programming. More at compassonthebay.com/reconnect. And the Worcester Art Museum, presenting Jewels of the Nile, where you can experience ancient Egypt in brilliant color through 300 pieces of jewelry displayed for the first time. Now on view. More at worcesterart.org.
Picture taken with the Black Hole Symphony. They were spectacular. Who am I? I'm Jim Browdy. She is Marjorie Reagan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We ran a little over because we were both so into the music.
Yeah, a lot of kudos from the emailers, Jim.
Are they loving it?
Yes.
It was really beautiful. In any case, earlier in the show, we talked to Christopher Muther, travel writer for the Globe, Deborah First, food writer, about their favorite places on the Cape. Temperatures soaring through the weekend. We thought we'd open the lines for the remaining 15 minutes to hear about your favorite places away on the Cape. It could be a restaurant, a mini golf. I never heard that expression when I moved here, miniature golf. We call it elsewhere. It could be the drive-in. It could be a beach. What's the place on the Cape? And don't be selfish and say, I don't want to say it because I don't want anybody going there and making it overcrowded. Be generous on a hot and beautiful Friday. What's the place on the Cape that will stay with you forever that you'd like other people to get a feel of? 877-301 89.7. If you say Four Seas ice cream,
I'm not going to say Four Seas. I've
what are you
already
going
said
to
enough
say?
about Four Seas, although it is great. I'll be going there this weekend. They have real whipped cream, which is really wonderful, and they make their ice cream fresh every day, and it
So
runs
what
out.
are you going to say?
You know what's a great thing to do on the Cape?
Yeah.
People come over the Sagamore Bridge. I don't know Falmouth that well. That's the Bourne Bridge. But they go over the Sagamore Bridge. They get on Route 6 to go wherever
Sure.
they're going down the Cape. I always get off and drive down 6A.
6A, yes.
6A is so beautiful. It's got these houses that were built hundreds of years ago, some of the earliest houses in Massachusetts, no doubt, not compared to Lexington where Bill McKibben was, but they've been around for a long time. Those beautiful little houses, everybody's got gorgeous greenery, gorgeous flowers.
That's a good one, actually. That's a really good one.
You can go all the way to Provincetown, really, on 6A.
Well, not
it
really.
changes.
You have to get back on 6 for a little bit. A little bit. You do. Yeah.
Okay, I think.
And then you get back on
they
6A.
merge, don't they? Merge, then you end up on 6.
Yeah, you do
Anyway,
again, yeah.
you can go an awful long way on
You
Provincetown.
can.
You certainly at least go through, Yarmouth and Chatham and Brewster and all these beautiful towns on the way to Provincetown. So that's just a nice thing to do. And
it's a great thing to
if you're
do.
coming back the other way,
Yeah.
if you don't want to sit waiting in traffic on the bridge to go back, heading toward Boston or wherever you're going, take 6A back. You may run into more traffic. I shouldn't say that because I'm going to ruin my ride home now.
Well, I just said, don't be selfish.
I'm not going to be selfish. It's much better to sit in traffic in
I
a
agree
pretty
with you,
environment than to
totally.
sit in the middle of the highway. So 6A is just a beautiful part of the Cape. What's yours?
My favorite is the Burger King at your exit. That's, by the way, is that the biggest American flag in America?
Biggest American flag
My
ever.
favorite two things, I think, and I've been going to Provincetown and Truro and Wellfleet probably for my whole adult life. One, my favorite restaurant is the Canteen. We've had the guy, the co-owner, on here, who not only is a wonderful guy and doing wonderful things in town, it's a restaurant where for totally affordable prices, which is unheard of in Provincetown, you go in, you get your food, and you go out to the beach and sit at a picnic table on the beach with music. There's a bar that's out on the beach for frozen drinks, whatever. Food's fabulous, affordable. It's great, called the Canteen. And the other thing, which is not that unusual, anybody that's ever been there, being in the dunes on the Cape in Provincetown and Truro is like being on the moon. It's like this music we heard it's just so otherworldly beautiful. It's indescribable. So we want to know, what's your sort of go-to kind of joint food, hotel, beach, whatever on the Cape? As Marjorie, what time are you leaving for the Cape today?
Right after the show.
Right after the show. Yeah. Nick and speaking of the Cape, Chatham, you're on Boston Public Radio. Hi, Nick.
Hey there. Normally Nick from Brighton, but I am currently at our in-laws' place here in Chatham looking at the hydrangeas right now.
Lucky for you. It's great to have you. What's the deal?
All right. So I was a barista down in a busy coffee shop down by the garden for several years. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I have some sort of opinion on what is good coffee, what is not, as someone who would sling drinks. Mm-hmm. In my estimation, I would recommend Jim as someone who only drinks coffee and seltzer myself.
Yep.
I would say the Snowy Owl Espresso Bar in Chatham is your place to go. It's tucked away off the main street. What they're doing there, I'd be happy to treat you with coffee some weekend while chilling here on the Cape.
It's a deal. And by the way, I could be wrong. I think Christopher and Deborah mentioned Snowy Owl in their piece, I think, that included Chatham. But regardless, I've written it down, and I hope I'll see you there. Nick, thanks for a great recommendation. Yeah, coffee on the Cape on a beautiful day is a great way to live.
Oh,
by the
yeah.
way.
Well,
sitting outside, it's just
still,
great.
It's crowded, but it's still really pretty. Somebody just texted before and said Maria Shriver and Arnold Schwarzenegger get married at St. Francis Xavier in Hyannis and not Our Lady of Victory. They may be right about that.
What, is that what you said?
Yeah, I may have said that. Caroline Kennedy got married at Our Lady of Victory, and they've got pictures of her there. And
you did say that, yeah.
I did say that, yeah. Okay, 877-301-8970 is the number. You can call us or text us at that number. James in Norwood, thank you for calling.
Oh, my God, I'm so excited to be connected with you guys. Fellow Jim, Marjorie, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, thank you very much.
James, what's up?
I just have to say, and I'm sure everybody's heard it, but the Beachcomber in Wellfleet, right off Cahoon Hollow, it's well worth the drive all the way up to Outer Cape. Anywhere in Wellfleet you can go. I mean, in town, out of town, along the ocean, Cahoon Hollow, getting one of those rum drinks and seeing the ocean, you can't replace it.
By the way, I don't mean to take the gloss off that beautiful notion. If there was ever a moneymaker on the Cape, would you say the Beachcomber is not it, James? Have you ever been there that wasn't packed? What?
But here's the problem. It's got an expiration date. pretty soon it's going to be swallowed up by the ocean.
You know, by the way, you are totally and completely right, sadly. James, thanks. By the way, that's where Christopher saw the shark, by the way, was at the Beachcomber.
That is what is really sad, is that so many of these places are not going to be there that long. Remember we had the story a few years ago about the little clam shack that was 80 feet from the ocean?
Where the experts said it'll be a decade, and what happened?
Wiped out.
Same year.
Wiped out, yeah.
It was in the Globe, great story.
It was a really horrible story because it was an unexpectedly big wave.
You ever been to the Beachcomber, by the way?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's
like in a movie.
I don't go there anymore because it was I always thought it was something where you went when you were like 21, you know, where people I know have disappeared for hours and hours and hours at the Beachcomber. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I do know what you mean. By the way, I was the oldest person at the Beachcomber when I was 30, much less now. Let's go to, but it's great. Liza, you're in a car. You're on Boston Public Radio. Hi, Liza.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Excellent.
Brilliant. I'm just calling to give you a heads up. Fabulous beach we just discovered in Truro a week ago. Fisher Beach. There's only 6 parking spots. And it's fabulous. Miles of sandals. And Wellesley, wind blows in the afternoon for cocktails and munchies. Fabulous.
That's pretty good.
What's it called in the afternoon? I didn't.
Winslow, she said.
Oh, Winslow's in the afternoon for cocktails.
Winslow. Yeah, cocktails. Come on, Marjorie.
Absolutely.
I might see you.
No, absolutely.
By the way,
I
you know what
love
it is?
rum drinks in the summertime, but I'm right with you, Liza.
It's on a mound of grass up at about a 10-foot hill in the center of Wellfleet, and it is just spectacular. And it's owned by somebody who owns one of the seafood, fried seafood joints in town, Max, or I don't know, but it's wonderful. Liza, thanks for that recommendation. 877-301-8970. Do you go to Lower Cape at all anymore, or is that when you were a kid?
I have been very boring. I get down there and I basically sit at where I am and kind of hang around the neighborhood that I grew up in. I should get out more often because there are all these other great parts of the Cape. You know, the Raw Bar, New Seabury Pompatus Inn, they have a great lobster roll there too. Paul from North Attleboro texted, and it's expensive, but it's.
He said $49, but it serves 2 or 3 people, so it must be huge.
And someone else also texted that I am not going to beat the traffic to the Cape because it's already started. That's probably true, but at least here I'm on this side. I mean, I'm closer. I'm closer than I would be if I went someplace else. Caroline on the road, thank you very much for calling.
Hi, Caroline.
Hey, long time, first time, and I've been dying to say that.
We're loving having you say it. Caroline, thanks. What's up?
So I agree with you, Jim. Provincetown, the entirety of the town is like my favorite. And specifically, I've started going to the campgrounds and staying at the campgrounds because it's more affordable. Both they got Dunes Edge and Coastal Acres. They got 2 campgrounds there, and it's all like a walk to town and everything, and I love it.
That's great. I have a lot of friends. I'm not a camping kind of guy, but I have a lot of friends who do it who are not camping types, and they love it. So those are good recommendations. And Caroline, I'm really glad you got through and really appreciate your listening. Thank you so much for doing it. You want to Denise from Marlborough was the first of a large number of people who said a bike ride on the Cape Cod Canal, which Christopher and Deborah also mentioned. I grew up in Sagamore and have fond memories of my bike rides.
PB Boulangerie Bistro in Wellfleet. Jim, you know about them? They have French pastries that are to die for.
Right on Route 6.
Carl in Watertown says, I don't know if the islands count, but if you're on Nantucket, head over to the Cheeseburger Shack at Surfside Beach. You won't be disappointed, and you can wash the grease off in the waves. Lisa from Cotuit says the chart room in Katamet for sunset after work on Friday is the best. Amazing frozen mudslides. We have all sorts of great suggestions from people. You know, in Hyannis, which is where I'm near, it's crowded in Hyannis, but that's where the ferries take off from, and it's got.
Well, Provincetown too, but just from Boston as opposed to.
Yeah, that's right. But there's a place there called Baxter's that you can sit out on the deck and eat, and it's fun to go there, especially with your kids, because what happens is if you don't hold on to your food, the seagulls come right down and grab the food right out of your hands.
Well, speaking of ferry, the high-speed fast ferry, whatever it's called, it's like 90 minutes. And as I think Deborah wrote in their piece, it was Deborah, she took it and you get to see whales at least 50% of the time. So it's like a twofer. And number 3, I can't believe I'm marketing Groupon. If you go to Groupon this week, the Fast Furry is 50% off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I said before the show, you know what I want to do sometime? I've never done it.
What's that?
Is take the train from Boston to the Cape.
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to be beautiful, and obviously you avoid the traffic. You can have drinks, and you go by a lot of the seashore, and it's supposed to be an absolutely gorgeous ride. You can take it down on a Friday night and take it back on Sunday. Let's go to Mark in North Providence. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Mark.
Hi there. Hey, guys. What you need to do is you need to go to the visitor center on the road to Race Point Beach. The upper deck on that visitor center is just gorgeous.
It is a great view.
Okay,
you can watch the planes take off from the airport. Go there in the morning. Go there for sunset. It's just awesome.
Yeah, I've been there. It is spectacular. That's a really good one.
Wait a minute. Where's Race Point?
Provincetown.
Oh, in Provincetown.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Mark, thank you. The outer beaches of Provincetown. Thank you. If the other great thing, by the way, we're talking to Bill McKibben about Third Act, which is for activists to be over 60. I think all you have to be is 50 to get a lifetime. I hope I'm right about this. I shouldn't have said it.
To the beaches?
To the national seashore beaches for $20 for a lifetime.
Is that right?
It's pretty great. You'd lose it, of course. You have to pay
I would
$20
lose it.
every
I'd lose
time.
everything.
But it's a great deal.
The Cream and Cone in Dennisport, best onion rings ever. Moby Dick's and Wellfleet Fish and Chips. Go for an early dinner so you can beat the tourists. The owner is super. He comes around to check on the diners every single night. I love that.
You know who I sent there, by the way? Talk about pride. Moby Dick, which has best fried seafood, I think, on the Cape. Guess who I sent there?
Who?
Roger Berkowitz.
Oh, my God.
Talk
From
about a
Legal Seafood?
meeting of seafood giants.
Yeah, I always wondered why there was not illegal seafoods on the Cape. Maybe he had enough up here.
Well, he doesn't own it anymore.
He doesn't own it anymore.
In the game,
listen to this. If the Obamas buy enough carbon credits, will their vineyard mansion be spared? That's the question from one of our
Always have to slide that baby in.
Emailers. Let's go to Bob in Gloucester. Thanks for calling.
Oh, hi. Yes, my cousin took me on he's been on the Cape forever, and he took me to Finesi's on P-Town.
Oh.
And it was really, we had a buffet, and it was a killer. It was the best buffet I've had in my life.
Tell us again.
Where?
It's Finesi, F-A-N-I.
Oh, yes, I know Finesi. Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Victor's is also great for a little high end in terms of price. It's a spectacular place. Extra couple of bucks. You go there probably once. That's a good recommendation, Bob. Thanks for that. By the way, I was wrong about absolutely everything I said about the pass to the National Seashore. It's not $20, it's $80. Lifetime. But it's lifetime, and it's not 50. You have to be 62.
Okay.
So I got nothing right. But I did get the concept right anyway. Thank you, Jamie, for doing that. I appreciate it.
We're
done.
out of time. The baseball league. Somebody just said that. You got kids who want to see baseball. Guys that wind up being in the baseball, like, the major
Something
league
like
baseball.
I read the other day, like a third of the players in the Cape Cod Summer League end up in the major league.
It's free. They asked you to give a donation, which you probably should, but if you want to be a cheapskate, you don't have to give
No, I got it
money.
backwards. A third of the players in Major League Baseball now played in the Cape Cod League.
The point is, you can see great baseball for free. But throw them some bucks because they need it. Anyway, we are done. All I'm thinking about is fried clams now. Thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thank you very much to people who came down here to the Boston Public Library. We really appreciate that.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
We want to tell you about what we're doing Monday. Oops, where's the end of my show? Oh, here it is. Okay. Monday, we'll have Boston Medical Center's Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett on for Ask the Doctor, the NAACP's Michael Curry, the folks from PBS new series, The Great Muslim American Road Trip.
Route 66. I've heard great things about this.
I remember Route 66 when we were kids.
Of course I do, yeah.
Yeah, remember was it Cookie, Give Me Your Comb?
Yes,
something
indeed.
like that? Yeah, okay. And the Reverends Irene Monroe and Emmett Price are going to be with us as well. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Mackenzie Farkas, Rebecca Tauber, our engineer, John the Claw Parker, our executive producer, that is Jenny Bologna. Our on-site engineers at the BPL today include Colin Cockrell, Sai Patel, Chris Hanks, Angelica Marrero, and Bob Fagnet.
It's hard to get that music on the air, too, and make it sound beautiful. We rarely do product promotion. The Flag, the Cross, and the Station Wagon by Bill McKibben. Brilliant. And again, special performance, 9 o'clock on August 25th, MOS, museumofscience.org/adults to hear that wonderful Black Hole Symphony. Marjorie, have a wonderful weekend. I hope you get to the Cape before tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
I am Jim Browdy.
I'm Marjorie Reagan. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for coming down to the library. Have a great weekend, and hope you can tune in on Monday.